being and nothingness. There are few ideas in philosophy that challenge us more quietly than this, that something exists at all. Before thought, before awareness, before time was even recognized, there was already a tension between something and nothing. Being is not merely about existing in a space or having a body that breathes. It is about presence itself, the fact that there is a world in front of you, and that you are somehow within it. We move through space surrounded by objects, people, places, sounds, and smells. But why is there anything at all, and not simply a silent blank absence? This question is not loud or violent. It doesn't knock down the door. It just sits patiently in the background of every conscious experience. Something is, and that is strange. We often take the existence of things for granted. The bed beneath your back, the sky above the trees, the heat from a mug, the texture of walls. They seem permanent until they aren't. But behind every object lies a hidden backdrop, the absence that could have taken its place. Nothingness, by its nature, cannot be directly seen. It is not a thing, not a shadow, not an object waiting in the distance. It is the absolute lack of things. Not the silence in a room, but the absence of the room itself. The absence of silence. A total void that leaves behind no memory, no evidence, no shape. And yet, we live as though nothingness never existed. We build lives and schedules, create families, write music, speak languages. We plan, decide, and remember. But all of this is layered on top of a very thin structure. Existence is fragile. Being is not guaranteed. Every person, every moment, every physical thing we hold eventually passes. And when it does, it doesn't simply become broken or lost. It ceases to be entirely. But that is what gives being its weight. That is what makes existing so profound. You are here, not as a possibility, but as a fact. Not as a concept, but as a presence. This tension between being and nothingness is not meant to inspire fear. It is not a threat. It is a gentle awareness that every experience is meaningful not because it's permanent, but because it's happening now. The simplest events, seeing light on a surface, hearing someone breathe near you, tasting water, are miracles of presence. They are victories against absence. And when sleep finally comes, it too is a form of being. Not conscious, not alert, but still present. Even in the most silent darkness, something is. Substance and essence. Every person moves through a world of objects, events, and relationships, but underneath it all lies the question, what makes a thing what it truly is? You can hold an apple in your hand, but is the apple only its skin, or the water inside, or the fibers that make it round? Substance is what something is made of, physically. The cells, the atoms, the raw material that gives it shape. But essence is something deeper. It's the set of qualities that make something the kind of thing it is, even if its appearance changes. And this difference matters more than it first seems. If someone loses their hair, changes their name, or even speaks a different language than before, they are still the same person. Their bones may weaken, their laugh may change, but their essence, the core identity that makes them, remains. Essence is what survives when outer things fall away. It's how a parent still recognizes their child even after 20 years. Not by sight alone, but by something more constant, more familiar, more inward. In daily life, we rarely stop to think about this difference. We know a candle is not just wax. We know a wedding ring is not just metal. The material helps the object exist, but it doesn't explain why it matters. A family photo isn't valuable because of the paper or ink. It matters because of what it means, what it is in essence. We assign meaning not based on ingredients, but based on identity. What something is made of may determine how it behaves, but what it is at its core determines how we relate to it. This applies even more deeply to people. No person is reducible to their job, their body, or their name. Someone may go through pain, recovery, change, and rebirth, and still be themselves. Essence carries across time like a quiet thread. You can't hold it or see it, but you recognize it. That's why a loved one's handwriting feels personal. Why the smell of their shirt brings memory. These are pieces of something not physical, but essential. To rest in this idea is to find peace in the things that last. Substance fades, it burns, breaks, and decomposes. Essence does not. It lingers. And in sleep, when the body becomes still and the senses begin to shut down, that essence continues quietly. It does not require motion. It does not require sound. It only needs to be. Thank you for still watching this video. Pause just for a second and subscribe to this channel. Now, let's continue. Cause and effect. Events rarely stand alone. There is a pattern in the world, a chain, a flow, a sequence. One thing happens and then something else follows. It begins early. A cry leads to attention. A mistake leads to correction. A spark leads to fire. This movement from one thing to another is called cause and effect. It explains why things happen, or at least gives us a way to make sense of what has happened. We tell stories based on it. We think in terms of before and after. Even pain is shaped this way. We want to know why it happened and what caused it. But cause and effect is not always simple. Sometimes we expect one thing to lead to another, and it doesn't. Sometimes we experience a consequence without knowing where it started. Causes can be distant, slow, hidden. They can be buried under layers of decisions or stretched across generations. The reason someone reacts harshly today might be tied to a moment they barely remember from childhood. The reason someone fears something might lie in a place they never speak of. And sometimes events unfold in ways no person could predict. Despite its complexity, cause and effect gives us a kind of structure. It tells us that things are not random, that there is a thread, even if invisible. It lets us believe that by understanding the cause, we might prevent the effect, that by knowing the root, we can change the outcome. This belief guides medicine, law, parenting, and even love. When we ask why someone hurt us or why we failed, we are searching for a cause, not just to explain, but to regain control. And yet, not everything must have a reason we can name. A feeling can rise without a cause. A kindness can be given without being earned. Cause and effect doesn't always bring justice. It doesn't always bring fairness. But it does bring a rhythm to the world. It tells us that our actions matter, that a whisper may lead to trust, that a single decision may change everything in quiet ways. When sleep comes, it too is part of this chain. It is not a break, but a continuation, a soft effect of all the causes that came before. Determinism versus free will. Choices seem simple from the outside. You pick what to wear. You speak when you're ready. You say yes or no. But underneath each action lies a deeper uncertainty. Did you truly choose, or were you simply reacting to everything that shaped you before that moment? Determinism is the idea that every action, every thought, every feeling is caused by something that came before. That your decisions are not independent, but the outcome of biology, environment, memory, and chance. If determinism holds true, then freedom is an illusion. You act, but not freely. You are driven, not choosing. Free will tells a different story. It says that within you lies a space that is not shaped by the past, that you can override impulse, that you can step outside of conditioning and act on reason or desire in a way that is truly yours. This is the foundation of accountability, of identity, of meaning. If you are not free to choose, then praise and blame lose their weight. But if you are free, then your choices matter, not just as effects, but as acts of creation. The tension between these two ideas is real, and it does not fade with time. Some days, life feels pre-written. Circumstances push us. History traps us. Pain repeats itself. Other days, life feels open. One sentence changes a relationship. One risk creates something new. You walk away when staying was easier. You forgive when revenge would have felt better. In those moments, the mind leans toward freedom. Still, determinism cannot be dismissed. There are patterns in every person. Habits they struggle to break. Stories they keep telling. But perhaps the answer lies not in choosing one view, but in holding both. You are shaped, yes, but not finished. You are formed, but still forming. The road behind you was not of your making. But the next step? That might still be yours. Even as the body slows and rest begins to take over, the self remains, tied to a path, but never completely bound. The shape of time. Time is a quiet teacher. It never speaks, but everything you know is marked by its presence. It stretches behind you as memory, moves beneath you as the present, and waits ahead of you as uncertainty. It is the backdrop of every event, the stage on which every life unfolds, but its nature is elusive. We measure it in clocks and calendars, but we feel it in moments. 1 hour can pass like a blink. One night can stretch like a season. Time does not move at the same speed for the mind as it does for the hands of a watch. Some believe time flows like a river, constantly moving forward. Others say it is a landscape, always complete, with the past and future existing at once, even if we cannot visit them. We do not need to solve time to experience it. A scar shows where time has passed. A song brings back a year in a second. Time binds memory and hope, regret and growth, all in a single, invisible thread. It cannot be touched, but it shapes every thought. Even waiting is an experience of time. What makes time so powerful is not only its motion, but its effect on identity. You are not who you were, but you are still you. Time does not just change surroundings. It changes the way a person understands themselves. It lets wounds soften. It turns strangers into family. It allows repetition to become tradition. And though it often moves unnoticed, its effects are permanent. You cannot return to a moment. You can only carry what it gave you. Sleep, too, is a relationship with time. In sleep, you exit the visible world of minutes and enter a slower space, where time blurs and bends. You wake older than you were. You dream in seconds that feel like hours. This chapter of time, quiet and unmeasured, allows the mind to rest from tracking it. And in this pause, time keeps moving, not rushing, not demanding, just continuing its quiet work. Mind and body. There is a line inside every person, drawn not in flesh but in thought, separating what is physical from what is felt. The human body moves, breathes, bends, and breaks, and yet behind its movements exists something else entirely: thought, intention, emotion, memory. The question has never been whether these two exist, but whether they are truly one or forever apart. When a body suffers, the mind reacts. When a thought takes root, the body responds. But even as they interact constantly, they remain strangers in some fundamental way. The body can be seen. It can be measured, treated, and touched. It obeys laws of gravity, metabolism, and physics. But the mind resists such simplicity. It cannot be opened with a scalpel or weighed like a heart. The mind holds pain that no X-ray can detect, dreams that no lab can measure. It remembers without warning, worries without stimulus, and finds joy in silence. The more we examine it, the more it recedes. It behaves like a ghost in a world of machines. And yet, the two are inseparable in life. A broken limb alters emotion. A rush of anxiety shifts the pulse. But this union raises questions. If the mind is only what the brain does, then every hope, every love, every fear is a chemical echo. But if the mind exists apart from the body, then where does it go when the body stops? If it survives, in what form? These questions do not invite clear answers, but they do reveal the mystery we live within. A human being is not just flesh, nor merely thought. Each person is a meeting point of two worlds, visible and invisible. Sleep is a powerful proof of this tension. The body rests, slows, drifts, but the mind does not disappear. It dreams, wanders, builds stories, replays voices. Even in stillness, it remains awake in its own way. The separation between body and mind is never complete, yet never quite resolved. And in that unresolved space, we live. One reality or two? Monism versus dualism. Every structure we live in, every idea we build, rests on the shape of reality itself. And here, a fundamental divide exists. Is everything made of one kind of thing, or are there two? Monism holds that reality is unified, that all things, no matter how different they appear, are built from the same foundation. Whether it's matter, energy, or consciousness, everything that exists is one substance in different forms. Dualism, in contrast, argues for separation. That mind and matter, thought and object, soul and body, are not just distinct in appearance, but in essence. This divide reaches beyond theory. If the world is truly one unified substance, then every part of it can, in principle, be understood through the same lens. The body, the brain, the table, the sky, they are all variations of the same single force, arranged differently. In this view, thoughts are physical processes, and even love is just chemistry with a name. But if dualism is true, then some parts of reality will never be touched by instruments or explained by equations. They will remain outside the grasp of physical tools. What we believe about the structure of reality changes how we treat ourselves and others. A monist world might lean toward reduction, toward seeing all human experience as explainable through cause, effect, biology, and laws of matter. A dualist world invites mystery. It says there is something non-material in every person that cannot be reduced or erased. It gives space for concepts like the soul, consciousness without body, or meaning beyond molecules. Even though these ideas are abstract, they show up in quiet moments, in grief, when we ask where someone has gone, in love, when we feel connected to someone across distance, in solitude, when we feel our presence as more than just a set of organs. These moments hint at something larger than physics, or perhaps a different kind of physics we have not yet learned to see. And as the body begins to rest and consciousness thins, this question continues in the background. Whether made of one world or two, we remain within the question itself. Never certain, always aware. Materialism. The physical world surrounds us. Walls, trees, animals, machines, all tangible, all observable, all measurable. Materialism asserts that this world is not just what we live in, it is all there is. Every thought, every emotion, every decision is the result of physical processes, however complex. There is no hidden realm, no supernatural force, no spiritual component. Only matter, energy, and the laws that govern them. What cannot be touched, recorded, or traced through physical means is considered, at best, a placeholder for something not yet understood. This view is compelling because of its clarity. It simplifies the universe to components we can study. The brain becomes an organ, like the heart. Consciousness becomes a process, like digestion. There is no need for invisible explanations, because the physical world is deep enough. At its best, materialism offers progress, technology, medicine, understanding. It invites us to trust what we can observe and repeat. It places value on evidence and grounds reality in things we can show. But there is a cost to this view. Materialism struggles with meaning. It sees love as chemical bonding, morality as evolution, and beauty as preference. That does not make those things false, but it changes how they are framed. There is no soul in a materialist world, only neural firing. No purpose, only adaptation. It does not deny that people care, or hurt, or dream, but it explains those things without appeal to anything beyond the material. For many, this is grounding. It removes superstition. It creates consistency. But for others, it feels empty. A world of matter alone may lack room for wonder or for sacredness. It may explain life while leaving people yearning for something more. And yet, even in that yearning, materialism offers its answer, that longing itself is physical. A pattern in the brain, a signal from the body. Sleep fits naturally into this view. It is a biological state, measured in waves and stages. It resets systems, conserves energy, processes memory. But even here, mystery lingers. Why we dream, why we feel the way we do while unconscious. These remain elusive. The material world is vast, but perhaps not yet complete. And so the mind rests, trusting the body to do what it does best, continue without question. Idealism. Where materialism ends, idealism begins. In this view, the physical world is not the foundation of reality. It is the result of something deeper. Consciousness, thought, awareness, these are not side effects of the brain. They are the core of existence itself. The mind does not emerge from matter. Matter exists because of the mind. The world you know, the sounds, textures, images, patterns, is not a world out there. It is a world constructed inside experience. Idealism does not mean denying that objects have weight or temperature. It does not say the world is fake. What it challenges is the assumption that the world exists independently of perception. What you see through your mind, and what you cannot perceive may as well not be there at all. In this way, the mind is not a part of reality. It is the center of it. Nothing exists for you without it. This may sound strange, but it aligns with how life is lived. Your joys are felt in consciousness. Your fears, hopes, and memories are internal. Even your understanding of external events passes through awareness. If everything is mediated by the mind, then the mind is not a mirror. It is the source. In this view, the universe is not made of things. It is made of experiences. Idealism places enormous value on subjectivity. It treats inner life as primary. It challenges the idea that what's outside is more real than what's within. For the idealist, a dream can matter more than a document. A feeling can weigh more than a fact. This can be liberating, but it also carries risk. If each person lives in a world shaped by their mind, then what connects us? What holds reality together? Even without clear answers, idealism reframes the entire world. It turns attention inward, not to escape, but to understand. And as consciousness begins to slow, and the world outside fades from focus, idealism holds that nothing is lost. For the mind, even in sleep, remains the only true home. The problem of universals. In a room filled with different objects, tables, books, shirts, leaves, there are patterns. We call several things red. We call many things chairs. We speak of courage in different people, though their lives are nothing alike. These shared traits, these repeatable ideas, are called universals. But what are they really? Do they exist somewhere, apart from things? Or are they just names we use to group experiences? The problem of universals asks whether general concepts are real. When you say beauty, does that word refer to something that exists on its own? Or is it just a word, a convenience to cover many different feelings? When two people say tree, are they pointing to a single essence or just using the same label for separate things? If universals are real, then qualities like kindness or shape or number exist outside of time, even when no one is thinking about them. But if they're not real, then we live in a world of particulars, and meaning is only what we decide it is. This has consequences. If justice is a universal, then it can be aimed for, discovered, perhaps even measured. But if it's not, then justice is only preference, shaped by culture or emotion. The same applies to beauty, to truth, to love. Universals give language power. Without them, everything is case by case. Nothing carries over. Every act is new, and nothing binds them together. But even those who doubt universals rely on them. We speak as if color is consistent, as if roundness, sharpness, height, and sadness mean something outside of this moment. The mind seeks patterns. It organizes reality by noticing similarities. Without this, thought collapses. Memory fades, connection breaks. In sleep, universals disappear. Dreams are not built on categories. They are strange, personal, specific. And yet, when we wake, we try to explain them in words, in symbols we hope others will understand. Even here, we use universals without knowing it. Whether they exist outside of us or not, they shape how we think. And without them, we would have no names for the world at all. Identity through time. There is a quiet puzzle that rests at the heart of every life. How does a person remain the same across years of change? From childhood to adulthood, through illness and health, through triumph and regret, something endures. When you look at a photograph of yourself as a child, you sense continuity, even though your body, memories, and habits have shifted. The question of identity through time asks what binds all the versions of you into one person rather than many. Some explanations point to memory. You remember moments that connect past and present, stitching together the sense of self like a thread running through fabric. Yet memory fades. Not every experience is retained. Whole years may vanish into haze, and even when recollection disappears, the sense of being the same does not. Others suggest the body is the anchor, but cells replace themselves. Bones heal and reshape. Faces grow unrecognizable over decades. If neither memory nor body can fully explain identity, then perhaps continuity comes from something less tangible, a point of awareness that persists, even as its contents change. Daily life offers glimpses of this mystery. You make promises today that your future self is expected to honor. You plan as if tomorrow will belong to the same person who exists now. You feel loyalty to earlier versions of yourself, even if you have grown past them. Identity, in this sense, is not a single quality but an unfolding, a process that connects all stages of life. Sleep deepens this question. Each night, consciousness softens, awareness contracts. Yet you wake with no doubt that you are the same individual. Even without memory of every moment in the night, you feel intact. Whatever identity is, it survives interruption. It persists through silence and darkness, holding your story together without always needing your permission or recognition. And so you continue, moving steadily from day to day, carrying forward an unseen thread that binds all your hours into a single existence. The self. Behind every thought and perception is the sense of a self, a quiet center from which life is observed. You may call it I, or me, or simply the person within. This self is not identical to the body, though it feels housed within it. It is not the same as a single memory or feeling, because it remains when those pass away. And yet, when you search for it directly, it often dissolves into experience itself. The self is the witness of every event but rarely becomes the object of scrutiny without slipping out of focus. Some describe the self as a narrative, an ongoing story the mind tells to create coherence. In this view, there is no fixed core, only the accumulated beliefs and memories that form identity. If these stories were altered or erased, the self would shift accordingly. Others hold that there is something stable beneath the narratives, a basic sense of being that cannot be reduced or removed. This awareness does not depend on the content of thought or even on language. It is simply presence, a quiet recognition that life is happening here to someone. The self is also relational. It is shaped by others, by the reflections given in conversation, by the responses of family, by the expectations of society. You learn who you are partly by seeing how you are treated. Over time, this network of interactions hardens into identity. But when those relationships change or disappear, the self can feel unmoored, as though the edges of who you are have softened. In moments of loss or transformation, the self feels most exposed. When familiar roles dissolve, when certainty fails, what remains is the bare sense of being, no longer propped up by titles or achievements. Sleep, in its own way, returns you to this simpler place. In sleep, the stories pause, the obligations recede. What endures is a presence that does not need to be explained. Even without words, the self remains. Panpsychism. Consider the thought that consciousness might not be an isolated property of complex brains, but rather a feature that exists everywhere in some form. Panpsychism proposes that all matter carries a kind of awareness, even if only faint or primordial. In this view, consciousness does not emerge from complexity alone, but is woven into the fabric of existence itself. Every particle, every stone, every cell contains some element of subjective experience, however minimal. This idea challenges familiar divisions between the living and non-living, between mind and matter. It suggests a world where the distinction between subject and object is softer than it appears. If awareness is universal, then the emergence of thought in humans is not a sudden miracle, but an unfolding of a quality already present in simpler forms. In this way, consciousness becomes a spectrum rather than an exception. Such a perspective can feel unsettling, as it implies that no piece of the world is entirely inert. The chair supporting you, the tree outside your window, the dust on a shelf. Each participates in existence with some degree of interiority. This does not mean they possess minds or intentions. It only suggests that experience is more widespread than it seems, like a current running quietly beneath all phenomena. Panpsychism also reframes human consciousness. Rather than being a rare anomaly, it becomes a complex arrangement of elements that are, in simpler forms, already conscious. Your awareness is an elaborate pattern of something that exists in every corner of the universe. This idea does not remove the uniqueness of individual experience, but it situates it within a wider context, a cosmos alive in ways too subtle to detect. Sleep may be the closest ordinary experience to this perspective. In the transition to sleep, awareness fades to something simpler. The self grows indistinct and perceptions blur. What remains is a quieter kind of consciousness, less bounded, less defined. If panpsychism is true, perhaps this dim state is a glimpse of the more universal awareness that pervades all things, waiting behind the noise of waking life. emergence. In the natural world, there are phenomena that cannot be explained by examining their smallest parts alone. Emergence is the idea that when many simple elements combine, they can create patterns, properties, or behaviors that are not present in any single component. A flock of birds moves as one body, though no bird knows the shape of the group. A brain produces thought, though no neuron contains an idea. This concept shows that wholes can be more than the sum of their parts. Emergence occurs across scales. In chemistry, molecules combine to form substances with properties unlike any of their elements. In biology, cells organize into organisms that sense and respond. In society, individuals create cultures and institutions that shape behavior beyond any single intention. Emergence demonstrates that complexity is not merely an accumulation, but a transformation. This idea offers a way to understand consciousness. While each neuron follows electrical and chemical rules, their interaction gives rise to awareness. Thought is not stored in any cell but emerges from the pattern of their communication. The same holds for social systems. No person alone can sustain an economy or a language, yet together, countless small actions create structures that feel as solid as stone. Emergence also reframes the question of meaning. If higher-order properties arise from simpler foundations, then significance does not need to be imposed from above. It can grow naturally from interaction. Beauty emerges in music from notes played together. Trust emerges in a relationship from shared moments. Life itself is an emergent property of chemistry, a fragile balance that generates its own purposes. In rest, emergence continues. Though you are unaware of it, cells repair, memories consolidate, and the mind reorganizes experience. Even as consciousness dims, complexity persists. The simplicity of sleep is built upon countless small processes unfolding in quiet coordination. It is a reminder that unseen forces shape every experience, and that the most profound changes often arise without deliberate control. The ship of Theseus. A thought experiment asks whether something remains the same when all of its parts are gradually replaced. Imagine a ship crossing the sea. Over time, every plank, rope, and nail is removed and replaced with identical materials. When the voyage ends, none of the original structure remains. Is it still the same ship? This question, known as the ship of Theseus, explores the nature of identity and persistence. The puzzle challenges the assumption that continuity requires material consistency. If a ship, or a person, can lose every component and still be recognized as itself, then identity must depend on something other than substance. Perhaps it resides in form, function, or the story that holds the object together across change. This idea applies to living beings as well. Every cell in a human body is replaced over time, yet the individual is seen as the same. Another version of the puzzle considers whether the removed pieces, reassembled elsewhere, create a second ship equally entitled to the name. If so, which is the original? The question has no single answer, but it reveals the tension between change and continuity. It suggests that identity may be relational, a matter of perception and intention rather than strict material criteria. In ordinary life, this problem appears in simpler forms. A family home renovated over decades, a tradition adapted by new generations, a friendship transformed by distance. We recognize continuity even as the details alter. The essence, it seems, is not fixed in any particular piece but in the pattern and purpose sustained over time. Sleep offers a parallel. Each night, consciousness unravels and reweaves. Memories fade or reorganize. The waking self is not precisely the same as the one that closed its eyes. Yet across all the small shifts, the sense of being remains steady. In this way, life becomes a kind of ship in constant repair, never identical from moment to moment, yet somehow enduring as one vessel. The principle of sufficient reason. At the center of all inquiry lies a quiet assumption that for everything that exists or occurs, there is a reason. The principle of sufficient reason states that nothing happens without an explanation, either in terms of its cause, its structure, or its necessity. This idea isn't loud or demanding. It operates in the background, shaping how questions are asked and answers are accepted. It is not enough to say that something is, we are compelled to ask why. This principle underlies science, law, history, and everyday decision-making. If a glass shatters on the floor, we don't accept the event as spontaneous. We look for the hand that dropped it, the vibration that nudged it, or the weakness in the shelf. If someone acts out of character, we don't shrug. We seek motive, influence, or hidden emotion. We assume that beneath every surface lies a sufficient reason, that even silence has a source. But this principle reaches further than events. It pushes into existence itself. Why does the universe exist? Why is there order rather than chaos? Why is there something rather than nothing? The principle of sufficient reason does not guarantee easy answers. It only insists that there must be one, and that assertion brings both comfort and unease. If all things have reasons, then perhaps all suffering has context, all joy has origin. But if some things occur without reason, the principle fails, and with it, a certain kind of stability. Daily life is built on the faith that things make sense, even if the explanation is hidden. The structure of explanation allows people to plan, hope, and forgive. When that structure breaks, when events feel arbitrary, disorientation sets in. We say life has no reason and mean more than confusion. We mean a loss of coherence. Yet even in randomness, the mind searches for patterns. It clings to the belief that a thread exists. In the drift toward sleep, this need for reason softens. Not because the mind gives up, but because the pressure to explain subsides. Dreams defy logic. They follow emotion, symbol, and memory rather than law. But even in their strangeness, the mind attempts to make sense. It remains tethered to the belief that nothing simply happens, that every flicker of thought, even in the dark, has a reason, waiting to be uncovered or gently released. The fabric of possibility, modal realism. Every choice not taken, every path not walked, every word not spoken leaves behind a question. What if things had gone differently? Modal realism explores the possibility that all alternatives are not just hypothetical, but real in their own right. That every outcome that could occur does occur, but not in this world. In this view, possibility is not merely imagined, it is actual, somewhere beyond reach. This idea stretches the concept of reality. Instead of one world unfolding with a single thread of cause and effect, there exists an endless collection of parallel realities. Each one contains different results, shaped by slight deviations in choice, chance, or condition. A version where you stayed, where you left, where you said yes, where you never spoke at all. These worlds do not interact, they do not touch. But if real, they form a vast landscape of experience, each as concrete as the one you inhabit now. The implications are unsettling. If all possibilities are real, then every mistake has a version where it was avoided. Every loss has a world where it never happened. In this frame, the self you are is one among many, a single leaf in a forest of outcomes. Yet this does not make life meaningless. It makes it layered. Every decision still matters because it defines this version of you. It sets the course of the reality you actually live in. This perspective also brings humility. It shows that the world could have been otherwise, that what you know as normal is only one slice of what's possible. Gratitude, regret, curiosity, all find new depth when seen through the lens of what might have been. Modal realism turns possibility into presence, not here, but somewhere. As sleep begins, these thoughts soften into a gentler space. The mind drifts into realms that feel both familiar and strange. You see places you've never been, live moments you never chose. Whether dreams are windows into these other worlds or just products of memory is not the point. What matters is the reminder that reality is not fixed, that life is not only what has happened, but what could have, and in some quiet sense still does. Zeno's paradoxes. Movement feels obvious. You take a step, and the floor rises to meet you. A hand reaches, and the object draws near. Yet beneath this certainty lies a series of ancient puzzles that question whether motion is truly possible at all. Zeno's paradoxes, though simple in form, unsettle the very notion of continuity. They ask, how can anything reach its destination, if before arriving it must cover half the distance, and before that, half of the half, and so on, endlessly? In the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise, a fast runner gives the slower creature a head start. Logic suggests he can never catch up. Each time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise has moved slightly ahead. The intervals shrink, but never vanish. Mathematically, the paradox exposes the infinite within the finite. It suggests that movement, which appears seamless, contains an unending number of divisions. This does not mean motion is false. You experience it constantly, but it forces a deeper examination of how time, space, and speed are understood. Perhaps motion is not a line, but a collection of points. Perhaps continuity is an illusion, stitched together by perception. The paradox does not break the world, it reveals the limits of intuition. It shows that even the most basic experiences contain complexity the senses cannot detect. In daily life, you trust motion. You rely on it without thinking. Yet, Zeno's paradoxes offer a quiet reminder that understanding often lags behind experience, that knowing how something works is different from knowing that it works. Not every truth is visible in motion. Some are hidden in its parts. As the body rests and stillness replaces activity, these questions remain. Motion ceases, breath slows, but time continues. Or does it? Is sleep a pause or a flow? Do dreams move, or are they simply placed one after another like still images on a reel? Zeno's paradoxes do not demand solutions. They invite you to feel the strangeness of what seems familiar, and to rest in the knowledge that even stillness carries its own mysteries. The block universe. Time feels like motion, a forward march. Past becomes memory, present becomes action, future becomes hope or dread. But some perspectives challenge this flow, suggesting that all moments, past, present, and future, exist at once. This view, known as the block universe, proposes that time is not something that passes. Instead, it is a dimension, fully laid out like a map. You do not move through time. You exist within it, at a particular coordinate. If this is true, then your birth, your turning points, your endings, all coexist in the fabric of reality. You do not create the future, you uncover it. You do not leave the past behind, you simply no longer occupy it. The block universe does not remove change, it redefines it. Each moment remains fixed, and what you call the present is merely the point your awareness currently occupies. This view alters how responsibility, hope, and regret are felt. If the future already exists, are your choices still free? If the past never truly leaves, do its effects ever fade? The answers are not given. What the block universe offers instead is perspective. It reminds you that every moment you've lived continues to exist, even if unseen, that every goodbye still stands in the timeline, uncollapsed. That even joy that felt fleeting was never erased, only left behind. Such a view does not require belief, it only requires contemplation, and in moments of stillness it may feel oddly comforting. Life becomes a sculpture rather than a river, each moment carved, enduring, part of a whole. Even as the present recedes into quiet, the rest of the timeline remains. The version of you that slept as a child, the version that will wake tomorrow, all part of the same fixed story. And as sleep settles in, you are not leaving time. You are moving to another coordinate in the same eternal structure, perhaps not to be measured in minutes, but in moments lived within it. The block universe does not flow, but it holds. It does not erase, but it includes. And within it, you are always somewhere. Ontological layers, pluralism. Reality rarely appears as one clean surface. It arrives in layers, each with its own rules, its own truths, its own language. Ontological pluralism suggests that there is not one single way to exist, but many. That being comes in forms too varied to collapse into a single category. Numbers exist differently than mountains. Dreams exist differently than laws. A melody is not less real than a chair. It is just real in a different way. This view avoids the trap of reducing everything to one kind of stuff, whether matter, mind, or logic. It honors the richness of experience by allowing for multiple modes of being. A thought, a country, a shadow, a gesture, each occupies a unique domain of reality, and trying to judge them by the same criteria leads to confusion. Pluralism does not claim that all things are equally important, only that they are real in their own distinct sense. In everyday life, this layered reality is taken for granted. You speak of goals, moods, beliefs, and objects as if they all exist in the same plane. But they don't. A feeling cannot be held in your hand. A relationship cannot be weighed. Yet both shape experience as much as gravity or light. Pluralism allows you to see this complexity without forcing every truth into a single mold. It also opens space for meaning. If reality has layers, then depth is not an illusion. Some experiences resonate not because they are louder or heavier, but because they occur in more abstract realms, those of purpose, connection, or wonder. Denying these layers leaves life flattened. A plural world, by contrast, is textured. It gives room for art, ethics, memory, and mystery. In rest, this layering becomes quiet but clear. The world of sensation fades first, sounds and sights dissolve. But other layers remain. Thoughts drift, emotions linger, memory flickers. Sleep does not erase these, it rearranges them. And in this layered descent, pluralism lives, not as a theory, but as the very structure of what it means to settle into being. What is knowledge? When people speak of knowing something, they often mean it as a kind of possession, a fact they carry, a truth they can repeat, a memory that feels reliable. But knowledge is more than information. It is a relationship between the mind and the world, a quiet bridge between belief and reality. To know is to stand not just in the presence of facts, but in alignment with them. Yet this alignment is more fragile than it seems. Belief alone is not knowledge. One may believe something deeply and still be mistaken, and truth alone is not enough either. Many truths exist that remain unknown for centuries. For knowledge to form, there must be belief, but also correctness. And beyond both, there must be justification, a reason why the belief is more than guesswork or luck. This structure seems simple, but real life makes it difficult. People believe what they've been told, what they've felt, what they want to be true. Sorting those from what actually reflects the world requires effort. Experience adds another layer. Much of what people claim to know comes not from first-hand contact, but from the trust they place in others, the shape of the earth, the function of the heart, the histories of nations. Most of this is known through testimony, not inspection. And so knowledge depends not just on logic, but on relationships, on trust, on memory, on interpretation. Still, even when knowledge is uncertain, people continue to seek it. They ask questions, explore, revisit, revise, not because they expect perfect certainty, but because the pursuit itself gives shape to thought. Knowledge is not just a goal, it is a method of living, a way of seeing the world that values clarity over comfort, process over assumption. And while sleep may pause the conscious effort to know, it does not remove the questions. It only gives them room to settle, to breathe, to wait quietly for the next waking thought. Rationalism. There is a form of knowing that does not begin with the senses. It begins with reason, with the belief that the mind on its own can discover truths that require no experience to confirm. Rationalism is the view that certain knowledge is innate, that thought itself contains structures more reliable than anything the body perceives. It holds that logic is not a tool, it is the foundation. From this perspective, clarity arises not from observation but from deduction. Just as one can understand that 2 + 2 = 4 without counting objects, rationalists argue that certain truths can be known purely through thought. These are not opinions, but necessary truths, unchanging and immune to the tricks of perception. Geometry, for example, or the rules of contradiction. They are not seen, they are understood. This approach values precision. It seeks certainty not in experience, which can be distorted, but in reason, which can be tested and rechecked. Yet this method has its limits. Rationalism does not easily explain color, taste, emotion, or memory. These are not constructed through deduction, but felt directly. In this way, rational knowledge is exact but narrow. It carves a sharp path through the fog, but does not touch every part of the landscape. Still, the rational mind offers something sleep cannot: permanence. Thoughts can be revisited with the same clarity each time. A logical argument holds across nights and years. Sleep erases detail, rearranges sensation, but the truths built through reason remain undisturbed. Rationalism provides a quiet backbone to knowledge, a structure that does not vanish with tiredness or emotion. And as the body slips into rest, that framework endures, not needing sound or sight to remain whole. Empiricism. Opposite the rational path lies the road of experience. Empiricism teaches that all knowledge begins with the senses, that the world speaks through sight, touch, sound, taste, and smell, and that the mind, without this input, knows nothing. In this view, no one is born with truth already inside them. Every idea must be earned through contact with the world. This philosophy values observation. It finds truth in patterns seen, in results repeated, in experiments confirmed. An empiricist trusts a fact not because it makes sense in theory, but because it survives inspection. If something cannot be tested, it remains uncertain. If something can be seen, touched, or recorded, it becomes trustworthy. The mind becomes a recorder, the senses its windows. Empiricism offers humility. It reminds us that knowing requires patience, that the world is not always what it seems, that assumptions must be checked against reality, but it also has its constraints. Not everything meaningful can be measured. The beauty of a moment, the weight of a decision, the pull of loyalty, these things are real but not always observable. Empiricism sharpens the focus but can miss the feeling. Still, this way of knowing shapes modern life. From medicine to engineering, from weather forecasts to architecture, empiricism underpins what works. It brings structure to learning, evidence to belief, and even sleep rests on its insights. The cycles of rest, the rhythms of dreams, the chemistry of silence, all tracked, studied, refined. Empiricism grounds the body as well as the mind, reminding us that truth often begins with what is felt before it is understood. Can we know anything? Skepticism. Beneath every attempt to know lies a quiet doubt. How can we be sure? The world is vast, the senses are flawed, the mind forgets, misinterprets, invents. Skepticism does not declare that truth is impossible. It simply asks whether certainty ever truly arrives, whether belief can ever stand untouched by error, whether what we call knowledge is not just well-dressed confidence. This way of thinking is not destructive. It is a test, a careful holding of belief at a distance, a refusal to accept what is easy without questioning its strength. The skeptic examines assumptions like a jeweler inspects a stone, not to break it, but to understand its flaws. In doing so, the skeptic hopes to find knowledge that does not crumble under light. But total skepticism leads to paralysis. If nothing can be trusted, then action becomes impossible. Relationships weaken. Learning stalls. The mind folds in on itself. That is why most skepticism is partial. It serves not to erase belief, but to refine it, to distinguish between certainty and hope, between tradition and truth. In everyday life, skepticism keeps language honest. It asks why we think what we think. It stops us from mistaking familiarity for accuracy. It does not eliminate trust. It makes it stronger because it has been tested. And in sleep, skepticism fades. The mind loosens its grip, relaxes its judgments. Dreams do not require proof. They arrive without needing to be believed. And perhaps in that release, skepticism is not defeated, but quietly rested, ready to resume when the world wakes again. Foundationalism. When knowledge is examined carefully, it appears as a structure, one belief built on another, forming towers of understanding. But if you keep asking why you believe this and then why you believe that, eventually you must reach something that is no longer based on anything else. Foundationalism is the belief that all knowledge must rest on a base. Some truths so secure, so clear, that everything else can be built upon them. Without such a base, knowledge becomes a floating web with no ground. Every belief depends on another, which depends on another, in a circle or an infinite chain. Foundationalism offers an anchor. It says that there are some beliefs, like the certainty of one's own experience or the truths of reason, that do not require support. They simply are. And from them, everything else can be derived. This structure is comforting. It makes learning possible. It allows people to test beliefs without collapsing everything they know. But choosing what counts as a foundation is not simple. What one person calls self-evident, another may call assumption. What seems indubitable today may fail under closer inspection tomorrow. Even foundations must sometimes be rebuilt. Still, this method shapes thought. It brings order to the vast field of knowledge. It says, begin here, secure the ground, then build upward. In daily life, this can mean holding on to core values or instincts and evaluating new information against them. In deeper thought, It means tracing ideas back to their roots, seeing whether those roots still hold. In rest, the structure remains. Consciousness dims, but the foundation does not disappear. It supports you even in silence. The beliefs you carry quietly beneath words, the sense of self, the expectation of waking, the trust in sleep's return, remain steady. And in that steadiness, rest becomes not an escape from thought, but a return to what holds it together. Coherentism. Some ways of knowing begin at the bottom, with basic truths, solid and fixed, on which other beliefs are built. But coherentism offers a different vision. It sees knowledge not as a tower resting on a few strong stones, but as a web, a structure held together by connection, not foundation. In this view, no belief stands alone. Each is justified by its relation to the others, forming a system where the strength of any one part depends on how well it fits within the whole. This model values harmony. If a new idea contradicts too many others, it feels unstable. If it fits smoothly within the rest, it earns its place. Coherentism trusts the balance of the system more than any single piece. The mind, in this view, is not a builder but a weaver. It brings together impressions, inferences, memories, and meanings, and organizes them not by hierarchy but by mutual support. This way of knowing resembles how people think in daily life. Beliefs are not often traced back to a single origin. They're weighed against what else is believed. If something feels out of place, people question it, not because it lacks evidence on its own, but because it disturbs the pattern. In this way, knowledge becomes a kind of resonance, a set of thoughts that work together without contradiction. But this approach has its risks. A coherent system might still be wrong if it's built entirely on false assumptions. A mind can be consistent and still mistaken. Coherence offers stability, not certainty. Still, it allows for flexibility. A new belief doesn't have to destroy the old. It only needs to be reshaped so the whole can hold. Sleep mirrors this structure. The mind slips from one idea to another, not by reason but by association. Dreams don't build, they wander, drift, connect. They reflect a kind of coherence that is emotional rather than logical. And in that soft coherence, the mind finds rest, not by anchoring to a truth, but by floating gently among familiar thoughts, all tied loosely together. Belief and truth. Belief is what you accept as real. Truth is what is real, whether you accept it or not. The tension between the two is subtle but constant. People live by beliefs. They act on them, argue over them, form identities around them. But belief does not guarantee truth. A person can believe deeply and still be wrong. Likewise, a truth can exist unnoticed, unspoken, unrecognized. It does not depend on being believed to be true. This separation creates a challenge. How do you know if what you believe is aligned with what actually is? The process of bridging that gap, of testing belief against reality, is the essence of thought. Some beliefs are held loosely, ready to change when new information arrives. Others harden, even in the face of contradiction. And some truths, though clear, remain difficult to accept, because they conflict with what the heart wants to believe. In everyday life, belief and truth overlap imperfectly. People trust their senses, their memories, their instincts. These sources are not infallible, but they are familiar. Truth, by contrast, often hides in unfamiliar places, in statistics, in history, in quiet facts that resist emotion. Navigating this space requires humility. It means admitting that belief is not always enough. That being sure does not mean being right. Yet belief is not to be dismissed. It guides behavior. It shapes love, trust, courage. Without belief, life has no direction. But without truth, it has no stability. The task is not to choose between them, but to bring them closer. To seek beliefs that reflect the world accurately, and to accept truths even when they require change. As sleep arrives, belief softens. The need to decide, to defend, to be certain fades. Truth remains, whether noticed or not. And in the space between belief and truth, the mind rests, quietly suspended, neither right nor wrong, only still. The Gettier Puzzle. There are moments when a person believes something, has a good reason for it, and it turns out to be true, but not for the reasons they thought. This is the puzzle posed by the Gettier problem. It reveals that even when all the traditional pieces of knowledge are present, belief, truth, justification, something can still feel off. The knowledge, though technically correct, seems hollow or accidental. Imagine seeing what looks like a real tree in the distance, believing it's a tree, and being right. But then you discover that what you saw was a detailed painting on a wall, and the real tree stood just behind it. Your belief was true, but not in the way you thought. That gap between appearance and reality, between what seems justified and what is actually the case, shows that knowledge is more fragile than it appears. This puzzle matters because it shows how easy it is to mistake coincidence for insight. How easily a person can be right for the wrong reason. It challenges the idea that knowing is just about being correct. It suggests that real knowledge requires a connection, not just between mind and fact, but between reason and result. That being right by luck is not enough. In daily life, such moments happen quietly. A person trusts their instincts and turns out to be correct, but later learns that the evidence they relied on was flawed. Or someone predicts an event for the wrong reasons but still feels vindicated. These situations show how difficult it is to define what it means to truly know. As sleep comes, the puzzle remains unsolved, but it no longer needs to be. The desire to be right gives way to a gentler state, a release from precision. Not all truths need to be held tightly. Some can be left to drift in the background, unresolved, like the quiet patterns of thought that fill the edges of a dream. A priori versus a posteriori. There are two ways that knowledge enters the mind. Some truths seem to arrive without experience. Others are shaped entirely by it. A priori knowledge is known before the world is seen. It is independent of observation. 2 + 2 = 4, not because it's been counted many times, but because it must be so. It holds in every place, in every time, without needing to be tested. A posteriori knowledge, by contrast, comes after experience. It tells you the sky is blue because you've seen it. That fire burns because you felt its heat. These two forms of knowing serve different roles. A priori knowledge provides structure. It creates the framework within which all else is interpreted. It does not shift with emotion or culture. It offers stability. A posteriori knowledge offers richness. It brings color, texture, and change. It allows for surprise. It shows what the world is like, not just what must be true in principle. In daily life, both are needed. You know that water boils at a certain temperature because you've seen it, but you also know that contradiction cannot be true, even if you've never encountered the case. The first shapes your understanding of the world. The second shapes your understanding of thought itself. This distinction matters not just for philosophy, but for how people learn and grow. Some things can be reasoned in silence. Others require touch, risk, mistake. Learning often moves between these two, starting with what feels self-evident and adjusting based on what the world shows. In sleep, experience fades. the sensory world grows distant. What remains are echoes of both kinds of knowledge. Images drawn from memory, dreams shaped by the rules the mind never forgets. The body rests, but the patterns endure, quiet and unseen, holding together what's learned before and what's felt now. Phenomenalism. There is a world outside the body, or so it seems. You see objects, hear sounds, feel textures. But phenomenalism challenges this picture. It suggests that objects are not things in themselves, existing independently, but rather bundles of possible experiences. A chair is not a structure of wood and screws. It is the collection of sensations, sight, touch, weight, sound, that occur when you interact with it. And when no one perceives it, it does not vanish. It simply continues as the possibility of future perception. This view shifts the center of reality. The world does not exist in some fixed, silent form outside the mind. It exists in how it appears and in the conditions under which it would appear. In this way, phenomenalism protects what is known without claiming more than can be observed. It accepts the world as it comes to us, through the senses, through patterns of experience, through the unfolding of perception. This does not make reality less real. It makes it more immediate. The tree is not out there in some distant, untouched form. It is here, in your vision, in the rustle you hear, in the smell of bark and soil. And when you turn away, it becomes not a vanishing object, but a promise. Something you expect to reappear if conditions return. Phenomenalism also redefines absence. An unseen object is not gone. It is waiting, held in the structure of what it means to perceive. What is known is not the object itself, but the possibility of how it would appear if you chose to look again. Sleep shifts the terms of perception. The senses withdraw. The world no longer appears. But the possibilities remain. The mind creates new sights, new textures, drawn not from objects themselves, but from remembered sensations. And in this space, phenomenalism quietly thrives. Reality becomes what is experienced, and nothing more is needed. The fallible mind. The mind is the instrument of knowledge. It records, interprets, reasons, and remembers. But it is also the source of its own distortions. Every person relies on their mind to understand the world, yet the same mind that discovers truth is vulnerable to error. It forgets details, fills in gaps, makes patterns where none exist. It protects, simplifies, guesses, and often it believes its conclusions long before confirming them. This idea is not an insult to intelligence. It is a recognition of complexity. The mind is shaped by survival, not perfection. It evolved to make decisions quickly, to avoid danger, to find meaning where confusion reigned, and so, while it serves us well, it cannot always be trusted without question. Two people can experience the same event and remember it differently. One person can feel certain, even when wrong. The fallibility of the mind becomes clear in moments of contradiction. You remember something happening one way, only to be shown otherwise. You form an impression that feels solid, then learn it rested on false signals. But these moments do not weaken the mind, they refine it. They remind us that belief is not the same as accuracy, that confidence is not proof. Still, people rarely abandon their beliefs easily. The mind prefers certainty to doubt. It leans toward what fits rather than what challenges. To live well with a fallible mind requires humility, a quiet awareness that you are always seeing through a filter. Not to distrust everything, but to move more carefully, to ask more gently, to hold space for correction. In sleep, the mind does something different. It stops checking. It stops testing. Dreams make no claim to truth. They simply appear, shaped by emotion, memory, and fragments of the day. And yet, even these strange stories reveal something about the mind, that it never truly rests, that even in stillness it continues its work, not perfectly, but faithfully, weaving what it has into something that still feels real. Relative truth. In the course of conversation, it becomes clear that people do not always agree on what's true. One person calls an act cruel, another calls it justified. One culture sees honor where another sees shame. These differences suggest that truth may not always stand apart from human experience, that some truths may not be absolute but relative, shaped by context, perspective, and need. Relative truth does not mean anything goes. It means that some truths depend on where you stand, that a claim about value, meaning, or rightness may not hold in every time or place. This idea is easiest to see in language. A word means one thing in one culture, something else in another. The meaning is not false, it is local. The same applies to customs, ethics, and even perception. What feels natural in one setting may feel alien in another. This view complicates judgment. It asks for more listening, more patience. When you meet a truth different from your own, the goal is not to defeat it, but to understand where it comes from. Relative truth encourages curiosity rather than conquest. It honors the fact that people live different lives, shaped by different conditions, histories, and hopes. But relativism also has limits. Not all truths are flexible. There are physical facts, biological constraints, and shared needs that span cultures. Water boils at a certain temperature. The body requires rest. Grief follows loss. Even in diversity, there is common ground. Living with relative truth means learning to navigate both, what's shared and what is not. It means making room for difference without losing a sense of what matters. And in rest, these layers quiet. The boundaries between yours and theirs fade. The mind drifts not into agreement, but into acceptance. That truth, like language, sometimes shifts, and that within those shifts, people still find meaning. Constructed realities. The world feels solid, but the way it appears is shaped by the mind. What is seen, understood, or expected is not raw reality. It is a version of it, constructed through interpretation. This idea suggests that perception is not a mirror, but a lens, that what we call the world is built in part by our own minds, through memory, language, habit, and meaning. From birth, every person begins building a model of reality. This model is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It simplifies complexity, highlights patterns, and reinforces what seems useful. Over time, this model becomes familiar. It becomes comfortable. It tells us how to behave, what to fear, what to hope for. But it is still a construction, and because it is built, it can also be rebuilt. Constructed reality helps explain why people can live side by side and still experience different worlds. The same event may carry joy for one person and pain for another, not because of what happened, but because of how it was framed. The mind doesn't just record, it filters, edits, and assigns value. The stories people carry shape what they see. This perspective does not deny the world outside. It simply acknowledges that access to it is always mediated, that what's perceived is touched by language and belief before it is fully understood, and that sometimes the construction itself becomes mistaken for reality. A map becomes a territory. A story becomes a fact. Recognizing constructed reality offers a gentle freedom. It means that when life feels narrow, some of that may come from the frame, not the world itself. That change is not only about what happens, but about how it is seen. And in sleep, this construction loosens. The mind builds without rules. It forms new associations, new images. It experiments with possibility. In this nightly remodeling, reality bends, and in that soft bending, rest deepens. Induction and uncertainty. Each day, you make countless judgments based on the past. You expect the sun to rise because it has always risen. You trust a friend to arrive because they did yesterday. You avoid touching fire because it burned once before. This process, drawing general conclusions from repeated experience, is called induction. It is how people learn patterns and build expectations, but at its core lies a quiet uncertainty. Induction assumes that the future will resemble the past, that what has been will continue, but this cannot be proven. No number of sunrises guarantees the next. No history of safety prevents a sudden change. The world may hold surprises that no pattern can predict, and yet, without induction, life would be unlivable. Decisions would collapse. Planning would stop. Trust would dissolve. So people rely on induction, not because it is infallible, but because it works often enough to sustain life. It is practical, not perfect, and this distinction matters. It allows for caution. It reminds us that what is likely is not what is certain. That wisdom includes both trust and doubt. In daily life, most people move forward without thinking about this. They take patterns for granted. They expect the floor to hold, the water to boil, the clock to count seconds evenly. But every so often, something breaks the pattern. And in that break, uncertainty floods in. That moment is not just about surprise, it is about the limits of prediction. In sleep, induction fades. The mind no longer calculates probability. It no longer tests what will happen next. Dreams unfold without reference to the past. They are stories untethered from precedent, and in that unpredictability, the pressure of certainty releases. The future, for a moment, no longer requires prediction. It simply arrives. Trust and testimony. Much of what is known does not come from personal experience. It comes from others, from parents, teachers, writers, friends, from strangers whose names will never be known. This is the nature of testimony. Knowledge passed from one person to another through speech, writing, gesture, or example. It is not seen firsthand, but believed through trust. This way of knowing is not weak. It is essential. Without it, people would be trapped within their own small worlds. You would not know the history of your country, the structure of your body, or the existence of distant places. Testimony extends understanding beyond the limits of perception. It allows people to share what they have seen and to build on it together. But testimony also requires caution. Not all sources are equal. Some deceive, some distort, some repeat what they've been told without checking. So to trust wisely means asking questions. Who is speaking? What interest do they have? What reason is there to believe them? This is not about skepticism for its own sake. It is about discernment, about learning who and what deserves confidence. And still, trust cannot be reduced to logic alone. Often, people believe not because of arguments, but because of character. They recognize honesty in someone's eyes. They feel sincerity in someone's tone. Trust is as much a matter of human feeling as it is of reason. In sleep, the voices of others fade. There is no testimony in dreams, only fragments of speech that echo without context. But even in rest, the mind carries what it has heard. A phrase, a lesson, a reassurance. Testimony continues in memory, in rhythm, in feeling. And in that quiet presence, trust lingers, not in words, but in the stillness they leave behind. The veil of perception. Every person lives within their own window of awareness, a stream of sight, sounds, sensations, and memories that feel direct and reliable. But beneath this confidence lies an old and quiet question. Do we ever truly perceive the world as it is? Or are we forever looking through a veil, one made of senses, filtered by thought and colored by expectation? What is seen is not the object itself, but a representation shaped by the eyes. What is heard is filtered by attention. What is remembered has already passed through emotion. This veil does not mean the world is imaginary. It means it is always mediated, always arriving through the structures of the body and the pathways of the mind. There is no direct access, only interpretation. Even the simplest experience, a tree swaying, a voice calling, the weight of a blanket, must pass through nerve endings, enter the brain, and be processed before it becomes real to you. And yet, despite all this distance, the world feels close, intimate, immediate. That closeness is a gift of the mind, not a flaw. The veil of perception is not a barrier meant to deceive. It is a bridge, a way to take in what the world offers, even if imperfectly. But the awareness of this veil changes how certainty is held. It introduces space to question what is seen, space to wonder whether what feels obvious might only feel that way because of how it was filtered. Sleep pulls this veil into something looser, less fixed. Dreams create new worlds that feel as present as waking life, yet they exist entirely within. In those moments, the mind builds reality from within itself. And when the dream ends, the veil returns, but perhaps more gently, more humbly, more aware that what is seen is never all there is. Solipsism. There is a strange and unsettling possibility that lives at the edge of self-awareness, the idea that nothing exists outside of one's own mind, that all people, places, and events are not part of an external world, but only experiences appearing within. This is not a belief most people live by, but it is a question that once asked never fully disappears. How can you prove that anything exists beyond your own consciousness? The moments of life feel vivid. A voice on the phone, a friend's laughter, the rustling of leaves, but every one of these is felt inside. You see someone's face, but it is an image in your perception. You hear their words, but the sound exists only through your ears. The world never steps outside your mind, it only arrives within it. Solipsism does not claim that others are not real. It simply points out that you cannot know it with absolute certainty, that every experience you have is, by nature, your own. And while it may be surrounded by assumptions, those assumptions rest on a trust you cannot prove. This realization can feel isolating. It can make the world seem small. But it also deepens the mystery of connection. Despite the solitude of consciousness, people still seek others. They still care, still love, still reach. The possibility that all is within does not remove the need for meaning. It may even intensify it. If the world exists only as it is experienced, then every act of kindness, every moment of beauty, becomes even more precious, not less. Sleep blurs this question further. In dreams, people appear and disappear. Stories unfold without origin. The mind moves through landscapes that feel shared, yet belong only to itself. And when the body wakes, the question remains unanswered. But in its silence, there is a kind of peace, a reminder that whether the world is shared or solitary, its presence is still deeply felt. Epistemic injustice. In a world built on knowledge, the ability to speak, to be heard, and to be believed is not evenly shared. Epistemic injustice is the harm done when someone is denied credibility or access to knowledge because of who they are. It occurs when voices are dismissed not because they are wrong, but because they come from a source others deem unworthy, because of gender, race, class, accent, or silence. This kind of injustice is not always loud. It appears in moments when someone speaks but is not heard, when their experience is questioned more than others, when their memories are assumed faulty, when their truth is weighed less because of how they look or where they come from. These moments add up. They tell people that their view of the world does not count, that their knowledge is less. This harm is not just personal, it is structural. It shapes how history is written, who gets to teach, who gets to lead, and who gets to define what counts as truth. It creates a world where some truths go unnoticed, not because they don't exist, but because they are ignored. The silence is not from absence, it is from exclusion. Recognizing epistemic injustice means listening differently. It means noticing when someone is interrupted, when their stories are doubted, when their authority is undermined without cause. It means valuing not just what is said, but who is allowed to say it. And restoring justice and knowledge is not just about fairness, it is about expanding the truth, seeing more, understanding more. In rest, the systems that silence others become quiet, the labels fade. The voices remembered in dreams are not judged by status. They appear as they are, unfiltered, unranked. And in that quiet equality, the mind holds space for a deeper kind of knowing. One that needs no permission to be true. The edge of knowing. There comes a point in every inquiry where answers grow dim, where the questions become larger than the frameworks meant to contain them. The edge of knowing is not a failure, it is a boundary, a recognition that thought can reach far, but not forever. That beyond what is known lies not just ignorance, but wonder. The unknown is not always a gap. Sometimes it is a horizon. People do not live with perfect maps, they live with sketches, with patterns that hold for now, systems that work until they don't. And when those patterns break, they are not discarded, they are revised. This is the rhythm of understanding. Build, test, adjust. Knowing is never final. It is layered, incomplete, always moving toward, but never quite arriving. The edge of knowing can feel frustrating. It is the place where certainty dissolves, where simple answers fall apart. But it can also feel freeing. It reminds us that not every mystery must be solved, that not every silence needs to be filled, that some truths live in questions too large for definition. In daily life, most people stay within what is known. They act, plan, and believe inside a space that feels secure. But every now and then, something pushes them to the edge. A loss, a revelation, a moment of awe. And there they glimpse the vastness beyond. Sleep rests at this threshold. It takes the mind just past the edge. It releases the need to know, to prove, to name. In sleep, the unknown is not a problem. It is a place, a space where thought softens, where uncertainty is not resisted but accepted. And from that edge, rest flows easily, without needing anything more. Shared understanding. The mind is private. No one else will ever see the world exactly as you do. And yet, across this solitude, people reach toward each other, speaking, writing, listening, explaining. Shared understanding is the fragile miracle that allows individual minds to connect. It is the act of building bridges between experiences, using words, gestures, pauses, and tone. This understanding is not guaranteed. Miscommunication is common. Meanings slip, intentions are misread, but people continue to try. They search for the right phrasing, the right silence, the right question. They try again when they fail, because connection matters. It changes how pain is carried. It softens loneliness. It allows thought to become something more than internal echo, Shared understanding does not mean perfect agreement, it means recognition, that someone else sees part of what you see, that your experience finds a shape in their response. It is not about facts alone, but about resonance, when words meet a place in another person that already knows. This act of understanding builds community. It creates culture, trust, and meaning. It allows people to collaborate, to remember, to forgive, and it reveals something profound, that knowledge, even when personal, is never fully individual. It is held in relationships, in rituals, in shared silence. Sleep, too, holds this rhythm. It is private, yet universal. Everyone enters it alone, but everyone needs it. Dreams are personal, but the need to rest, to drift, to soften, this is shared. And in this final quiet of thought, understanding remains, not spoken, not analyzed, just felt, like breath in the dark. A closeness that needs no explanation to be real. The meaning of good. The word good is everywhere. It appears in small gestures, in big promises, in quiet decisions, a good day, a good friend, a good life. But what does it really mean? What makes something good? Is it what feels right? What causes joy? What avoids harm? What follows a rule? This question is not technical, it is intimate. It reaches into every choice, even the ones barely noticed. To say something is good is to say it has value. But value can come from many places. Sometimes it comes from the results. An act is good because of what it brings. Sometimes it comes from the intent, the heart behind it. And sometimes goodness is seen as something deeper, something intrinsic, not tied to outcome or reason. Just a sense that this, whatever it is, matters. But people disagree. One person may see discipline as good, another sees it as cold. One sees freedom as good, another sees danger. So goodness is not a single light. It shifts with the world, with culture, with mood. Yet it still guides. People still move toward it. They may not agree on every detail, but they know when something is missing, when what should feel whole feels wrong instead. To live with this uncertainty is not weakness. It is honesty. It means looking closer, listening longer, choosing with care, not just for results, but for what it means to live with those results. Goodness is not a finish line. It is a direction. It is the soft pull that shapes how we treat each other, how we forgive, how we raise children, how we end days. And in sleep, this question does not disappear. It rests beside us, not demanding, not loud, just present. The mind may stop thinking, but it does not stop caring. What matters continues to matter even in silence, even in stillness, even in dreams. Utilitarianism. There is a way of thinking that weighs actions by their results, that sees morality as a matter of impact. Utilitarianism asks a simple question: what brings the greatest good to the greatest number? It does not judge an act by its intention, its tradition, or its beauty. Only by its effects, on pain, on pleasure, on suffering, on joy. In this view, a good act is one that increases well-being, not just for the person acting, but for everyone touched by the ripple. A decision is not private, it moves outward. It affects strangers, systems, futures, and so, moral reasoning becomes a form of calculation. What will happen if I do this? Who will be helped? Who will be harmed? Could another choice lead to better outcomes? This framework is appealing in its clarity. It offers a way to compare options. It focuses on lives, not rules. But it is also heavy, because sometimes doing the most good may mean hurting someone along the way, or choosing what feels cold for the sake of the many. It asks people to step outside their feelings, their attachments, and look at the bigger picture. And yet, no one can see all effects. No one knows the future. So even this clear model requires judgment, humility, restraint. You aim for the most good, but always within limits. Limits of knowledge, limits of emotion, limits of time. In daily life, this view shows up in the small question, what will this cause? It's in the pause before speaking, in the effort to help, in the weighing of needs. And in rest, these calculations fade, the moral math slows, but the care behind it, the desire to do good, remains. Not solved, not complete, just resting, ready to return. Duty and rules, deontology. Some say that what matters most is not what happens, but why it happens. That actions are not good because of their results, but because they follow principles. This is the heart of duty-based ethics. It teaches that morality lives in rules, rules that hold even when outcomes change. That to act rightly is to respect what is right in itself, not just what it might bring. In this view, truth-telling is right even when it hurts. Promises matter even when they cost. People are never means to an end. They are ends themselves. The rule is not about convenience or benefit. It is about respect, responsibility, dignity. These values are not strategies. They are standards. This form of ethics does not demand prediction. It does not ask what might happen. It asks only whether what is done could be done by everyone, whether the act could stand as a law for all. It is demanding. It offers no shortcuts, but it is also steady. It gives guidance when feelings blur and when results are unclear. Duty asks each person to be more than instinct or impulse, to pause, to think, to do what is right even when no one is watching, even when the reward is absence, even when the cost is high. This path can feel cold at times. It can feel distant from love, from mercy, but it holds the line. And when everything else feels uncertain, duty remains, a compass not swayed by storms. And in sleep, duty does not press. It steps back. It knows that rest is not the breaking of rules, but the quiet between them. The place where intention softens, where doing is replaced by being, where the sense of rightness does not disappear. It simply pauses, quietly at your side. Character over rules, virtue ethics. While some ethics ask what rules to follow or what outcomes to aim for, another approach asks a different question entirely. What kind of person are you becoming? This is the path of virtue. It sees morality not in isolated acts, but in habits of character. In the way someone lives, speaks, chooses, not once but over time. Virtue ethics is not about obedience, it is about growth. A person becomes just by doing just things, courageous by choosing bravery even when afraid, kind by practicing kindness. Morality here is not a rule book, it is a rhythm, a way of being that takes shape like a garden, planted, tended, refined. Slowly. This view does not offer perfect answers. It does not give instructions for every case. Instead, it builds moral strength from within. It trusts that a good person will know how to act well, not because they follow a chart, but because they carry wisdom. Because they see clearly, because they care deeply. It is a lifelong project, not a test. Virtue lives in the ordinary, in how someone speaks when no one is listening, in how they treat others when tired, in how they handle failure. These moments don't announce themselves as ethical. They simply reveal who someone is, and character is not fixed. It can be shaped, bent, grown. No one is born virtuous. People become so through effort, through mistakes, through reflection. And in this, the ethical life becomes not a burden, but a path of meaning. In sleep, this process continues quietly. There is no rule to follow, no result to seek, but the self remains deep beneath thought, becoming, evolving, gently carried forward by every act done when awake. Moral relativism. What feels right in one place may feel wrong in another. Across cultures, across times, across families, moral codes shift. One society honors silence, another honors speech. One condemns, another forgives. These differences lead to a difficult question. Is morality fixed, or does it change with context? Moral relativism says that values are not absolute, that right and wrong are shaped by time, place, belief, and need, that no single system holds the key for all people. This idea does not mean morality is meaningless. It means it is woven into life, into history, language, religion, pain. It grows where it is planted. Relativism invites respect. It asks for caution before judging. It reminds people that others live by different stories, that what seems obvious in one culture may be invisible in another. It teaches humility, not indifference, listening, not surrender. The goal is not to abandon values, but to understand where they come from, and to hold them with care, not certainty. But relativism also carries a warning. If all morality is local, then how do we challenge cruelty? How do we speak for justice when others call it dishonor? This is the edge of the idea. It allows space for difference, but it also demands discernment. Compassion must remain even in the face of unfamiliarity, and some truths may still call across all boundaries. In the quiet of rest, these questions soften. Cultures fall away, customs fade. What remains is the shared human feeling, the desire to matter, to do well, to be treated with dignity, and that desire, whatever name it takes, speaks the same in every tongue. Moral absolutism. There is a belief that some things are right, always, everywhere, that there are actions so deeply wrong, no context can excuse them, that certain values hold, not because a culture agrees, but because they are true in themselves. This is the idea of moral absolutism. It says there is a fixed standard, a line that does not bend no matter where or when. This kind of thinking brings clarity. It offers a foundation when everything else feels uncertain. If cruelty is wrong, then it is wrong even when it is common. If honesty matters, then it matters even when it hurts. Absolutism tells us that some principles are not made, they are discovered. They exist even when ignored. They do not depend on votes, traditions, or mood. This view has strength. It helps people stand against injustice when the crowd stays silent. It gives moral courage. It says, "This is wrong," even if the world says otherwise. But it can also be harsh. It leaves little room for context, for complexity, for change. It demands decisions in sharp black and white, even when life arrives in shades of gray. In daily life, people move between absolutes and exceptions. They hold on to core values, but they adjust when love, loss, or duty pull in new directions. Absolutism remains in the background, like a compass pointing north. You may not always follow it, but you feel its pull. And in sleep, this moral clarity softens. The rules stop demanding, the lines blur, the questions fade. What remains is not judgment, but intention. A quiet sense of wanting to do right, even when what that means is not always clear. The trolley problem. A train races down the tracks. Ahead, 5 people are trapped. You stand near a switch. If you pull it, the train diverts. But on the other track, 1 person stands alone. Do you pull the switch? Do you let fate play out, or do you intervene and become responsible for a death? This is the structure of a moral puzzle known as the trolley problem. It confronts the tension between doing harm and allowing harm, between saving many and harming one, between the clean simplicity of numbers and the tangled weight of action. In this thought experiment, there is no perfect answer. If you act, you cause death. If you don't, you allow it. Either way, someone is lost. And that's the heart of the puzzle. It shows that morality is not just about knowing right from wrong. It's about what kind of responsibility you can live with, what kind of burden your decision leaves behind. This problem isn't limited to trains or switches. It appears in real life every day, in how resources are distributed, in how justice is balanced, in decisions that help some while hurting others. It reveals that being moral is not about avoiding hard choices. It's about facing them with eyes open. And even when there is no answer, the question matters. It shapes how we weigh lives, how we measure pain, how we decide who counts. Ethics, in this light, is not neat, it is not pure, it is human, imperfect, difficult, essential. In sleep, the train slows, the tracks dissolve, the choice fades into silence, but the echo of the question remains, not as a demand, but as a reminder that to care about what's right is already a form of choosing. The categorical imperative. Some moral rules do not depend on results. They stand alone because they treat others with the respect every person deserves. The idea is simple. Act only in ways you believe should apply to everyone. Do not lie unless you think lying should be universal. Do not harm unless you believe harm should be a rule. This principle demands consistency. It asks you to take yourself out of the moment and ask what the world would be like if everyone made the same choice. It is not about consequences. It is about fairness, about dignity, about treating others as people, not tools. It turns morality into a mirror. Whatever you choose, ask if it could be shared. This way of thinking is hard. It removes excuses. It does not let you say just this once, or for the greater good. It asks for more. Not more sacrifice, but more integrity. A life where actions reflect values, not circumstances. A life where others are never used, only honored. But people are not perfect. They fall short. They act from fear, anger, exhaustion. The mirror breaks sometimes, yet the principle does not disappear. It stays, quiet and waiting, ready to remind, ready to reflect. In the stillness of rest, this idea does not accuse. It watches, not harshly, but gently. It is not there to punish, but to guide. And in that silence, the mind finds space to begin again, not with judgment, but with intention. Living well, eudaimonia. Beneath the rules and dilemmas, beyond the calculations of pain and fairness, there is a deeper question. What does it mean to live well? Not just to do the right thing, but to live a life that feels full, aligned, meaningful. This idea is called eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that grows not from comfort or success, but from the full expression of one's nature. Living well is not about chasing pleasure or avoiding pain. It is about harmony between action and value, between self and others, between inner life and outer role. It does not mean perfection, it means coherence. That your choices reflect who you are trying to be, that your days are shaped by purpose, not just momentum. This kind of life requires effort. It calls for reflection, adjustment, patience. It grows slowly, like a tree, and it looks different for everyone. For one person, it may mean creating, for another, serving, for another, simply being present with care. There is no formula, only the steady search for balance. Living well is not a state, it is a practice. It cannot be completed, it must be renewed each day in small acts, in how you listen, in how you treat others, in how you carry your own burdens. And in sleep, this pursuit does not end. The striving pauses, but the sense of direction remains. Even in dreams, the self continues to grow, not through will, but through rest, through stillness, through quiet becoming. Consequences and outcomes. Some choices seem small when they're made. A word spoken, a door opened, a step taken. But over time, these moments ripple outward. They lead to other moments, other lives, other paths. This is the heart of consequentialism, the idea that morality is measured by what follows, that the right thing is what leads to the best result. It sounds simple: help more than you hurt, create more good than harm. But outcomes are rarely clear in advance. An act meant to protect may cause pain. A kindness may be misunderstood. A silence may lead to peace or loss. And so, the task becomes one of foresight, of thinking beyond the immediate, of weighing not just the action, but the world it leaves behind. This approach values responsibility. It asks people to care about effects, to think beyond impulse, to consider others not just in feeling, but in impact. But it also carries weight, the pressure to get it right, the fear of doing harm by accident, the awareness that even good intentions can go wrong. And yet, it is a path many walk without knowing. Every plan, every apology, every gift is shaped by what is hoped for, not just now, but later. It is how people try to love better, lead better, live better, not by standing still, but by imagining what could follow. As rest begins, the outcomes recede. The long arc of effect gives way to the present moment. No future to manage, no result to calculate, just stillness. And in that pause, the need to do good remains, not as a pressure, but as a promise, waiting to resume with the morning. Self-interest and ethics. Every person carries needs: to eat, to rest, to feel secure, to be respected, to feel love, to pursue meaning. These needs shape decisions, even moral ones. Self-interest is not selfishness, it is survival. It is the quiet current beneath every choice, even the generous ones. And the question arises, can ethics live alongside self-interest? Can doing what is right include doing what benefits you? This idea does not ask you to reject your own life. It asks you to look at how your well-being fits into a wider field. Ethics, rooted in self-interest, says that moral behavior grows when people see their own fate tied to others. That fairness matters because trust matters. That honesty is valuable because it builds relationships that last. That helping others creates a world you would want to live in too. But self-interest has limits. It can crowd out empathy. It can justify harm when protection feels urgent. It can turn morality into a transaction, where nothing is done unless something is gained. And yet, to deny it completely is not honest. People want to live well, they want to feel safe, they want to thrive. Ethics must make room for that reality. The balance is not easy. It means recognizing when you are protecting yourself and when you are hiding behind that protection. It means learning when to step forward and when to step aside. It means seeing yourself as part of a moral equation, not outside of it. Sleep brings a softer view. The drive to protect, to gain, to secure loosens its grip. The mind rests without bargaining, and in that quiet the self still exists, not demanding, but present, part of the same shared world that every other person seeks to survive in, too. The ethics of care. Not all moral questions are solved with rules or calculations. Some arise in closeness, in the space between people who matter to each other. The ethics of care is built on connection. It begins not with law, but with relationship. with empathy, vulnerability, and responsibility. It says that to be moral is not just to be fair, but to be attentive. This view sees people not as isolated individuals, but as parts of a web. Each person depends on others. Each moment of care shapes not just the one who receives, but the one who gives. This is not weakness, it is the heart of human life. No one is born alone. No one heals alone. Even independence is taught, guided, held. Care ethics values the specific. It does not speak in large systems, but in small acts. In how someone listens to a child. In how a hand is held at the end of a long day. In how one chooses to stay, even when leaving would be easier. These choices are not always dramatic, but they are deeply moral. This approach resists the coldness of abstraction. It refuses to flatten people into roles or categories. It honors emotion as part of moral reasoning. Not noise to ignore, but a guide. A compass made of feeling and memory. In sleep, the rhythms of care remain. The body may rest, but the heart remembers. The bonds you hold, the people you protect, the gestures you've offered, they echo in dreams. And in those quiet hours, care becomes more than action. It becomes presence. Is morality real? People speak of right and wrong as if they are part of the world, like gravity or light. But morality raises a deeper question. Is it real? Does good exist as something out there, waiting to be discovered, or is it something we create? Is morality a fact or a shared agreement? A truth or a tradition? This question does not ask whether people act morally. It asks whether moral describes something more than preference, whether kindness is good in itself or only because we say so, whether justice exists outside of our minds or if it only lives in language, in culture, in feeling. If morality is real, then there is something solid beneath our decisions, something that does not change with time or place or mood. If it is not, then ethics becomes something we build and rebuild through stories, rules, experience, and need. Either way, it shapes how we live. People act as though morality is real. They feel wronged, they seek forgiveness, they risk themselves to protect others. These choices suggest that ethics is more than convenience, that it matters, even when unseen. That some things are worth doing even without reward. But morality, real or constructed, still requires attention. It must be learned, practiced, questioned. Whether it is found or made, it does not act on its own. It waits to be chosen. And in sleep, the reality of right and wrong pauses. Not because it disappears, but because it is not needed. Rest is not moral or immoral, it simply is, and that simplicity gives the mind space to hold the question without needing to solve it. The problem of luck. In moral life, effort matters, intention matters. But sometimes, outcomes are shaped by things beyond our control. A driver who speeds may arrive safely, while another, driving carefully, causes harm. One act leads to disaster, another leads to praise. But the difference was chance. This is the problem of moral luck. It asks how we judge people when results are shaped by fate, not choice. Should someone be blamed for a failure they could not predict? Should someone be celebrated for a success born of timing, not talent? Moral luck shows that control is not complete, that the same decision made by different people can lead to different judgments, simply because the world responded differently. This problem creates tension. People want justice to be fair. They want praise and blame to match effort. But reality does not always allow that. Outcomes shape how actions are remembered, not just what was done, but what happened after. Moral luck also softens judgment. It reminds us that anyone could fall, that mistakes sometimes come from the world, not the will. That forgiveness may begin not with explanation, but with humility. Living with moral luck means recognizing the limits of judgment. It means holding space between what someone intended and what occurred. It means understanding that ethics includes not just action, but aftermath. And in sleep there are no consequences. The mind drifts through images without results. It tells stories without cost. And in that freedom, the burden of moral outcome fades, if only for a while. Contracts and morals. Many of the rules people follow are not written in law books. They are agreements, spoken or silent, that shape how society functions. These are moral contracts. You drive safely, trusting others to do the same. You wait your turn, even when no one is watching. You treat others with basic dignity because it is expected, and because they do the same for you. Moral contracts are not about paper. They are about trust. They allow people to live together without fear, to build structures, to raise families, to walk through public spaces without suspicion. These agreements are not enforced by force. They are kept by expectation, by habit, by mutual respect. This idea says that morality is in part a social creation, that it emerges from the need to coexist, that people give up certain freedoms to gain peace, that justice is built not from above, but from among. But contracts can fail. When they are broken, trust collapses. When some benefit while others carry the cost, resentment grows. When one voice writes the terms and another is forced to obey, fairness disappears. A contract, to be moral, must be equal. It must be chosen, not imposed. This view sees ethics as a shared project, not a set of commands but a process, a negotiation of needs, risks, and care. It does not end. It must be maintained, renewed, adjusted. In sleep, contracts are suspended. There are no deals, no roles, no obligations. The body rests not because it should, but because it must. And in that deep stillness, the memory of mutuality remains. A quiet sense that life, even at rest, is shaped by how we move among others. The is-ought divide. There is a moment in almost every conversation about right and wrong when a line is crossed without warning. A person describes how things are and suddenly declares how they should be. This leap is common, natural, but it hides a deeper problem. Just because something is doesn't mean it ought to be. This is the divide between fact and value, and it runs quietly beneath every moral claim. The world shows us what exists. People lie, people suffer, people compete, but none of that tells us what is good. Reality does not carry instructions, it simply unfolds. To move from what is happening to what should happen requires more than observation. It requires judgment, and that judgment cannot be proven the same way facts can. It must be reasoned, felt, understood in context. This divide protects against moral laziness, against saying, "This is how people are, so we should accept it." It demands more. It says, describe carefully, then pause. Ask what matters. Ask whether the current is pulling towards something better, or merely something familiar. In life, the leap from is to ought often happens without thought. You see someone struggle and feel moved to act. You hear injustice and feel a duty to respond. These impulses are not errors, they are signs of conscience, but they must still be traced. Why does this matter? What values are shaping your response? Sleep respects no such boundaries. It does not separate description from command. It moves freely, blurring what happens and what should happen. And in that freedom, the mind can rest, the questions can wait, and the space between is and ought becomes a calm, quiet pause. Altruism. There are moments when a person gives without expecting anything back, when they offer time, comfort, safety, or love with no thought of return. These acts may go unnoticed. They may be quiet, small, even invisible, but they speak to something rare and powerful: altruism, the willingness to care not for benefit, but for someone else's good. Altruism is not weakness. It is not a denial of the self. It is a recognition that someone else's need can matter as much or more than your own. It breaks the logic of transaction. It interrupts the flow of self-interest. It says this person matters, not because they offer anything, but because they exist. Some say that even altruism contains benefit, that helping others brings a sense of pride, connection, or peace. But that doesn't undo its value. Motives are rarely pure, and what makes altruism powerful is not perfection, but priority. The moment when another's well-being becomes central, when their pain becomes your own. Altruism shows up in crisis, but also in routine, in how a parent listens, in how a neighbor stops to check in how someone carries another's burden without being asked. These choices build the quiet fabric of community. They keep the world softer than it would otherwise be. In sleep, altruism rests, but its traces remain. The warmth of helping, the memory of giving, the feeling of being there for someone else, all of it lingers. And in those silent hours, the self is not erased. It is simply held within a larger sense of care. Cultural morals. Across the world, people live by codes shaped by their history, faith, geography, and language. These codes form the structure of daily life: what is praised, what is punished, what is honored, what is feared. They are passed from generation to generation, often without being questioned. These are cultural morals, and they shape how we see right and wrong. No culture is without them. Whether spoken through rituals or written in law, these moral systems reflect a people's memory, their struggles, triumphs, hopes, and fears. What is polite in one place may seem rude in another. What is brave in one story may seem reckless in another. Culture gives moral life its color and variation. But culture also creates tension. When different systems meet, misunderstandings arise. Judgments are made. People defend, compare, resist. And in this collision, a question forms: are all moral systems equal? Or are some more just, more kind, more honest? There is no easy answer. Cultural morals deserve respect, but not immunity. They must be held up to light, measured by how they treat the vulnerable, by how they respond to dissent, by whether they can grow. A tradition is not sacred just because it is old. It is sacred if it brings life, protection, and dignity. Living in a global world means learning to walk with difference, to hear without immediately judging, to reflect before reacting, and to know that understanding culture does not mean excusing harm, but approaching it with insight, not assumption. In sleep, culture fades. The customs, the rules, the inherited behaviors soften. What remains is the human underneath, the one who longs, fears, breathes. And that shared humanness across all cultures is the place where ethics begins again. Pleasure and the good life. Pleasure is often misunderstood. It is seen as indulgence, distraction, escape. But at its root, pleasure is the body's way of saying yes, a signal of safety, fulfillment, alignment. It is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet satisfaction, a moment of stillness, a shared laugh, a deep breath. The good life, for some, is built around these moments. A life that values joy, not as the only goal, but as a guide. This is not about excess, it is about attending to what nourishes, to beauty, connection, rhythm, and rest. It means creating space for delight, even when the world feels heavy. But pleasure alone cannot sustain meaning. It must be integrated with purpose, with care, with limits. When pleasure forgets others, it becomes empty. When it respects balance, it becomes grounding, a source of energy, not avoidance. This idea is not about chasing sensation. It's about learning what truly satisfies, what brings light without cost, what feels good and right. These pleasures are often small, a gesture, a sunset, a meal shared. They build a life that feels lived. In sleep, the pursuit of pleasure pauses, but its traces linger, the memory of ease, the softness of touch, the quietness of contentment. And in that rest, the body finds pleasure again, not as excitement, but as peace. Divine commands and rightness. For many, morality does not begin with human choice. It begins with a higher voice, a will beyond the world, a source not invented but received. This is the idea of divine command, that what is right because it flows from the sacred, not because it works, not because it feels fair, but because it is spoken by the one who created all. In this view, morality is not discovered through reason or feeling, it is given. A path revealed through scripture, tradition, or direct experience. It calls for obedience, for humility, for trust. Not blind, but faithful. A willingness to follow even when the reasons are unclear. This form of ethics offers strength. It creates a center that does not shift with the culture. It brings unity, clarity, and discipline, but it also invites hard questions. What if commands seem cruel? What if interpretations clash? What if the voice seems silent in a time of need? Living with divine command requires discernment. It means listening deeply, testing the fruits of faith, asking not just what is commanded, but how it is lived. For any command, sacred or not, must be carried by human hands, and hands can twist even the clearest message. Still, the idea endures. That morality is more than debate, that it comes not from within, but from above. That to be good is not just to think or feel, but to respond to something greater. In sleep, the voice of command quiets, not because it is gone, but because the heart needs rest. Faith, too, must breathe, and in the silence of night the soul listens, not for words, but for presence. The social contract. Civilization did not emerge by accident. It was built on an agreement, silent or spoken, that people would live together under shared rules, that they would give up some freedom in exchange for safety, order, and peace. This idea, the social contract, is not a single document. It is the invisible foundation beneath every law, every vote, every institution. It asks, what do we owe each other, simply because we live side by side? The contract is not perfect. It has been broken, rewritten, ignored. But the idea remains that no one rules alone, and no one obeys without reason. Power, in this view, is not taken, it is given. And legitimacy flows from consent, not conquest. To live under a social contract is to accept limits for a greater good. You stop at red lights, you pay taxes, you stand in line. Not because you enjoy it, but because you know others are doing the same. And in that mutual restraint, freedom is preserved. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to live without fear. This idea also carries weight. It means that when the contract fails, when justice disappears or trust is broken, the people have a right to speak, to resist, to demand repair. The contract is not a cage. It is a circle of respect. And when that circle is betrayed, change becomes not rebellion, but renewal. In sleep, the rules of society fade. No one governs your dreams. No one drafts laws for the mind. But the need for peace, for trust, for safety, that remains. And it is this quiet need that the social contract tries, imperfectly, to meet. the state of nature. Before laws, before cities, before government, there was only the state of nature. Not a place, but a thought experiment. It imagines what life is like without structure, where no one rules and no one is ruled. Some see this state as brutal. Others see it as pure, but all agree. Without order, everything is uncertain. In this space, survival becomes the only law. Safety is not guaranteed. Promises are not protected. Strength replaces fairness. Even the good become cautious, not because they are cruel, but because they are afraid. Trust is rare when every person stands alone. The state of nature shows why society forms. People come together not out of weakness, but out of necessity. They build walls, then rules. They trade a little freedom for peace. And in doing so, they leave the wildness behind. But the idea of nature is not only about fear. It also asks what is lost when structure arrives. In nature, no one needs permission to live as they choose. No one enforces sameness. Some believe freedom is fullest in the wild. Others believe it begins only with order. The truth may lie somewhere between. Even today, the state of nature echoes, in moments of crisis, in forgotten places, in systems that break down. It reminds us what is at stake, what society is meant to protect, and what happens when it fails. In rest, the wildness of nature returns, not as violence but as instinct. The mind travels without law, the body returns to breath, and in that quiet wilderness something essential is remembered. What is justice? Justice is a word spoken often but understood differently. To some it means fairness, to others it means balance, to many it means getting what one deserves. But beneath all these meanings lies a single hope, that the world can be made right, that harm can be answered, that dignity can be restored. Justice is not always about punishment. It can mean healing, repair, recognition. It can mean giving voice to the unheard and power to the excluded. It can mean stopping harm before it begins, and when it fails, the absence is loud. Injustice is not quiet. It is felt in silence, in anger, in despair. Justice lives in laws, but also in hearts. It shapes how people treat strangers, how they respond to stories that are not their own, how they share what they have. It asks more than what is legal. It asks what is right, and often those are not the same. But justice is hard. It requires listening, waiting, sacrificing. It means balancing one person's pain against another's needs. It means holding space for truth even when it hurts. It means remembering that fairness is not always sameness. In sleep, the scales are put down. The courtroom closes, the questions wait, but the longing remains. Even in dreams, people search for fairness, for a sense that things make sense, that wrongs can be mended, that justice, if not perfect, is still possible. Liberty and its limits. Freedom is often spoken of as the highest good, the right to speak, to move, to choose, to believe. But freedom does not live alone. It touches others. It creates echoes. And so the question arises, where does your liberty end and another's begin? Liberty is not chaos. It is shaped by boundaries. You are free to act, but not to harm. Free to speak, but not to silence. Freedom becomes meaningful when it lives alongside responsibility. Not because it is restricted, but because it is shared. Some fear that limits shrink liberty, but limits can protect it. Without them, the strong dominate the weak. Without them, noise drowns out silence. Without them, freedom becomes a mask for power. True liberty is not the absence of restraint, it is the presence of respect. Still, every society must decide where the lines fall. What is protected, what is permitted, what is punished. These are not simple decisions. They carry history, fear, hope, and they are never final. Liberty must be defended, but also defined again and again. In sleep, liberty changes shape. The mind wanders freely, untouched by law or rule, but even here it moves within limits. The body rests, the heart slows, the rhythms return. And in that balance, freedom is felt, not as rebellion, but as peace. Capital, labor, and Marx. In every economy, there is work and there is wealth. There are those who labor and those who own. This divide shapes how societies are built, how resources are shared, and how people live. The relationship between capital and labor is not just financial, it is deeply moral. Labor creates value. The builder lifts the stone. The farmer plants the seed. The teacher lights the mind. But often, the rewards of labor flow elsewhere, to those who control machines, land, systems. This creates tension. One person works, another profits. The question arises, is this fair? This idea examines not just wages, but power. Who decides what is made? Who benefits? Who is heard? It sees the economy not as a neutral field, but as a stage of struggle. Between profit and need, between control and survival. It asks whether freedom can exist when laborers depend on owners to live. But it also asks what kind of world is worth building. One of endless competition or shared purpose? A world where people serve markets or where markets serve people? The answer is not simple. Labor is not just about money. It is about meaning, about dignity, about the chance to contribute and to rest, to build not just for others, but for oneself. And in sleep, labor ends for a while. The hands unclench, the mind stops calculating. The body, whether rich or poor, finds the same stillness. And in that stillness, the dream of fairness remains, not just for some, but for all. Community and the self. No one lives alone. Every person is born into something larger, a language, a family, a neighborhood, a history. Even those who feel most separate are shaped by the presence of others. Community is not just a collection of people. It is the invisible structure behind every choice, every belief, every moment of connection or conflict. But community also shapes the self. It teaches us how to speak, how to act, what to value, and what to fear. Some see this influence as comforting. Others see it as limiting. Yet either way, it is undeniable. The self does not form in isolation. It grows in relationship. Still, the self is not erased. There is always something unique, an inner voice, a private memory, a sense of I that persists even when surrounded. The tension between self and community is constant. Too much isolation, and life becomes cold. Too much conformity, and the self disappears. The challenge is to belong without dissolving, to contribute without losing what makes you distinct. Community is more than agreement. It includes disagreement, distance, difference. What holds it together is not sameness, but care, a willingness to share space, a readiness to let others exist fully, even when their choices feel unfamiliar. In sleep, the noise of society fades, the roles dissolve. You are no longer mother or stranger, worker or citizen. You are simply present. And in that silent return to self, the memory of connection remains, like a soft imprint of every voice that once called your name. Do we need government? Imagine a world without government. No laws, no officials, no enforcement. Would people help or harm, build or break? Would society flourish through mutual respect, or collapse into fear and force? The question of government's necessity is not abstract. It is woven into every debate about freedom, order, justice, and trust. Government exists to manage conflict, protect rights, and guide collective action. It builds roads, mediates disputes, responds to crisis. It is the structure that channels power through process. Yet its presence can also be heavy. It can overreach, silence, corrupt, or neglect. And so, the question isn't just, do we need government, but what kind, how much, for whom? Some believe humans can self-organize, that shared values and social pressure are enough. Others believe that without formal structure, chaos grows. That government is not a luxury, it is a safeguard. Between these views is a shared concern. How do we live together without destroying each other? Needing government does not mean loving it. It means recognizing that human life is fragile and structure can support peace. It means acknowledging that freedom without order is just another kind of risk, and that good government, like good shelter, is not always noticed until it is gone. In sleep, the weight of governance lifts. No laws guide the dream, no systems regulate thought, but the desire for safety remains, and the longing to wake into a world that makes room for both freedom and care. Dreams of utopia. There is a longing in every generation for a better world, a place where suffering ends, where justice flows, where every person lives in peace and dignity. This is the dream of utopia, not a perfect blueprint, but a vision, a glimpse of what might be possible beyond the limits of today. Utopias speak to hope. They imagine cities without hunger, communities without fear, lives without exploitation. They offer contrast to the world as it is. They challenge us to ask, does it have to be this way? Could we live differently? Could we treat each other with more grace? But utopias also carry danger. When turned into rigid plans, they can become oppressive. One person's dream can become another's nightmare. In chasing perfection, people may forget the complexity of real life, may overlook disagreement, pain, or dissent. Still, the dream matters. It does not have to be literal. It can be an anchor, a compass, a call. Utopia reminds us not to settle, to believe that change is not only needed but possible. And in sleep, utopia arrives quietly, not in grand architecture or flawless cities, but in the feeling of peace, in the warmth of belonging, in a moment where everything feels whole, even for just a breath. Power and control. Power is not always loud. It can be quiet, subtle, hidden. It moves through titles, through money, through systems and speech. It shapes what is possible and what is punished. Power defines who decides, who gets to speak, who is seen. Control is the visible side of power. It is how power operates, through rules, through fear, through habits too old to question. Sometimes control protects, sometimes it suppresses. It is not always imposed by force. Often it works by expectation, by shaping what people think they deserve. Power is not evil. It is part of every relationship, every institution. But it must be watched, questioned, shared. When it hardens, it can silence truth. When it flows too freely, it can cause chaos. The challenge is not to eliminate power, but to make it accountable. In everyday life, people hold power without knowing it, in their voices, their choices, their presence. To recognize this is not guilt, it is clarity. With power comes responsibility, even if it's small. In rest, power slips away. There are no rulers in sleep, no commands, no control. Just breathe, just stillness, just being. And that too is a kind of freedom. Alienation. There is a kind of sadness that comes not from pain, but from distance. A gap between what you do and what you care about, between who you are and what the world reflects back. This is alienation, the feeling of being apart from your own life, of working without meaning, of living without connection, of drifting inside systems that do not see you. Alienation is not always visible. It hides behind routine, behind politeness, behind the phrase, "I'm fine." It appears in work that feels hollow, in cities that feel cold, in moments when your own voice surprises you because you haven't heard it in so long. It is not only personal, it is structural. It grows in economies that value output over joy, in systems that separate creation from purpose, in cultures that praise surface and forget soul. Alienation whispers, "You are here, but not present. Alive, but not felt." But to name it is to resist it. To say, "This is not how life should feel," is the start of returning. Connection heals, expression restores, purpose reawakens. Alienation thrives in silence, but it weakens when met with honesty, and sleep too can mend it. In dreams, no one is invisible. The self returns whole, not fragmented by tasks or roles, just present, just known, just enough. When rules break, civil disobedience. Most of the time, rules are followed. Not because they're perfect, but because they hold the world together. They create patterns, boundaries, expectations. But there are moments when a rule fails, when it no longer protects, when it begins to harm. In those moments, obedience becomes a question, and disobedience a moral act. Civil disobedience is not chaos. It is not rebellion for its own sake. It is the deliberate breaking of a law to reveal something deeper, that justice has been misplaced, that power has grown careless, that silence has become too heavy. It is a way to say, "This is not right," not with violence, but with vulnerability. Those who disobey do so at cost. They accept punishment, not because they believe they deserve it, but because the law must be held accountable. This is the paradox: to break a rule out of respect for what the rule was supposed to serve. Fairness, dignity, life. Civil disobedience is not an attack on society. It is a call for it to live up to its promise. It is the voice of conscience in a system that has forgotten how to listen. And though it often begins with one person, it speaks to all. In sleep, rules fall away. There are no signs to obey, no orders to follow, but the need for justice remains. The dream remembers what the day forgets, that sometimes the only way to honor the law is to refuse it. Freedom from versus freedom to. Freedom is one word, but it has two faces. One is freedom from interference, from control, from fear. The other is freedom to act, to create, to become. The first is about space. The second is about possibility. Together they form the full shape of liberty. Freedom from is the ground. It says, "Leave me alone. Let me breathe. Let me live without threat." It is protective. It builds walls around dignity, around choice, around selfhood. But walls alone are not enough. Freedom, too, is the door. It asks, "Now that I'm safe, what will I do? What can I build?" It is creative. It needs resources, education, time. It is not about being left alone. It is about being empowered to move forward. A society may give freedom from violence but deny freedom to speak. It may give freedom from poverty but deny freedom to love. True freedom balances both. It creates not just absence of harm, but presence of opportunity. For the individual, this balance matters. Too much withdrawal and life becomes small. Too much pressure and choice becomes burden. Freedom lives in the space between, a space where people are not only protected but invited to grow. And in rest, both kinds of freedom arrive. There is no demand, no interruption. The world pauses, and in that pause, the mind stretches, not as a prisoner, not as a project, but as something quietly, fully free. Majority and minority. In a world built on numbers, the majority often decides. Votes are counted, polls are taken, crowds are measured. The assumption is simple. What most people want must be right. But history reminds us, what is common is not always just. The majority has power, but that power must be tempered. Because every majority was once a minority, every popular idea was once strange, every group now safe was once silenced. Morality is not a matter of counting, it is a matter of conscience. The minority matters, not because they win, but because they speak. They see what the majority cannot. They carry stories that the system forgets. When they are ignored, something vital is lost. Not just fairness, but truth. The strength of a society is not in how it treats those who agree, but those who dissent. The measure is not in control, but in care. Can the many make room for the few? Can power protect without crushing? Can we listen, not just tolerate? Majority and minority are not fixed roles. They shift, reverse, evolve. What stays constant is the need for balance, for attention, for protection of the voice that is quiet, but not less. And in sleep the numbers fade. There is no majority in a dream. No vote, no poll, no crowd. Only one voice, drifting. Only one soul, resting. And that, too, is enough. Gender, power, and ethics. Power does not always wear a uniform. Sometimes it is woven into expectations, into who speaks first, who is believed, who is safe walking home at night. Gender is not just identity, it is history. It is the echo of centuries in the way someone is treated, seen, heard, or dismissed. Ethics must face this. It must ask not only what is right, but for whom. What kindness means when one group carries fear, what justice means when one voice is ignored, what fairness means when one body is policed more than another. This is not about blame, it is about awareness. Gender shapes how power flows, who carries burden, who receives credit. It shapes the stories told in school, the policies written in law, the silence in boardrooms, the rhythm of daily life. But power is not fixed. It can be shared, it can be reimagined, it can be built again, not by erasing difference, but by honoring it, by seeing care as strength, vulnerability as clarity, listening as courage. Ethics lives in these choices, not just in abstract rights, but in the shape of a hallway, the tone of a voice, the structure of a home. When we talk about justice, we must ask whose world we are building, and for whom. And in sleep, gender dissolves. Not because it doesn't matter, but because the dream does not judge. It allows presence without role, being without performance. And in that quiet, the self can simply rest, unmeasured, unwatched, whole. Republic or empire? Every society must decide what it wants to become. A republic aims for shared power, law, and voice. An empire gathers force, expands, commands. One seeks order through consent, the other through control. The difference lies not just in size, but in soul. A republic listens. It moves slowly, by debate and vote. It protects the many from the few. It accepts limits, honors law, invites participation. But it is fragile. It can fracture under fear. It can be undone by apathy or power dressed as protection. An empire moves quickly. It builds, it conquers, it centralizes. It promises glory, but often leaves silence. It does not ask for voices, it demands obedience. And while it can last long, it often forgets the people it was meant to serve. The pull of empire is strong. It offers strength, simplicity, clear order. But the cost is often freedom, and the price is often memory. A republic must be defended not with weapons, but with attention, with care for truth, for fairness, for the slow work of democracy. This question is not only national, it lives in every organization, every home, every relationship. Do we build through sharing or through control? In sleep, no state rules the mind. There is no flag in a dream, no vote, no army, just silence, just breathe. And perhaps in that pause the question fades, not because it is answered, but because the heart remembers what power feels like when it is gentle. Who deserves what? Fairness often begins with the question, who should get what? Who deserves comfort, safety, respect, recognition? Some say reward should follow effort. Others say need should guide distribution. Still, others look to status, history, or talent. There is no single answer, only the quiet complexity of merit, justice, and belonging. Desert feels natural. You work hard, you want reward, you suffer, you want relief. But life does not always align with effort. Some inherit fortune. Some meet barriers they did not build. Some give everything and receive little. So, what does it mean to deserve? This question lives in classrooms, workplaces, courtrooms. Who is promoted, who is heard, who is helped first. And behind each decision is a moral map, one that weighs value, cost, intention, and outcome. A society reveals its soul in how it answers. But fairness is not only about calculation, it is also about recognition, seeing each person as someone who matters. Not just for what they've done, but for who they are. And when systems forget this, something precious is lost, not just equity, but dignity. In sleep, there are no rankings, no lists, no score. The mind rests not because it has earned rest, but because it needs it. And in that need, there is no judgment, only stillness. Culture and equality. Culture shapes how people live, but it also shapes what they receive. What opportunities are open, what voices are centered, what beauty is praised. And so, equality cannot be discussed without asking how culture opens or closes doors. Not all traditions offer the same space. Some lift up certain ways of speaking, dressing, thinking. Others push difference to the margins. And sometimes, what is called equal really means conform. But real equality doesn't ask for sameness. It asks for respect across difference. Cultural equality means more than celebration. It means access, influence, safety. It means seeing culture not as a barrier, but as a bridge. Not something to tolerate, but something to learn from. It means noticing whose stories are told and whose are not. Equality across culture is slow work. It cannot be achieved through slogans. It must be built through listening, changing, sharing power. It must include discomfort, complexity, and care. And in rest, culture softens. The symbols fade. The expectations lift. What remains is the human underneath it all, resting not as a label, but as a body, as a mind, as someone who has always belonged. Opportunity and access. Not all doors are open to everyone. Some are locked from birth, others are hidden. Still others are open in theory but guarded by cost, language, or fear. This is the difference between opportunity and access. It is not enough to have the right to climb if no one provides a ladder. Opportunity says, here is a chance. Access asks, can you take it? A school may exist, but is it reachable? A job may be listed, but is it realistic? A vote may be legal, but is it safe? These questions are quiet, but urgent. They separate potential from reality. Fair societies build paths. They don't just offer dreams. They remove barriers, close gaps, light the way. And when someone stumbles, they ask why, not with blame, but with curiosity. Opportunity must be more than theoretical. It must be livable. Access is not charity. It is justice. It means giving people the tools they need to move, speak, build, heal. It does not promise success, but it promises the chance to try. And in sleep, the body takes what it needs without permission. It does not ask if it has earned rest. It simply claims it. That is access in its purest form, the ability to receive what sustains life. Who owns the world? The land beneath your feet, the water in the river, the sky above the city. Who owns these? Is the earth property or inheritance? Commodity or trust? This question is older than nations and deeper than laws. Ownership creates order. It assigns rights. It protects boundaries. But it also excludes. To own is to say, this is mine and not yours. It divides space, even when that space was once shared. Some things seem natural to own. A tool, a home, a keepsake. But others raise harder questions. Can someone own the ocean, a forest, a seed? When ownership grows without limit, it swallows what was once common. The wild becomes fenced. The future becomes sold. This is not a call to abolish ownership. It is a call to examine it, to ask when it serves life and when it suffocates it, to ask whether the earth can be borrowed without being broken. In dreams, no one owns the wind. The mountains rise without deed. The sea sings without contract. And in that world, something is remembered, that not everything valuable must be possessed. Idealism versus realism in politics. Some believe in how the world could be, others in how it is. One hopes, the other plans. One dreams of justice, the other manages compromise. This is the tension between idealism and realism, a balance every society must navigate. Idealism looks forward, it imagines change. It refuses to accept cruelty as necessary. It lights a path that does not yet exist. But idealism can float. It can forget the weight of now. It can ignore the cost of dreams. Realism, by contrast, looks down. It measures limits, it negotiates, it speaks in steps, not leaps. But realism can sink. It can become cynical, forgetful, tired. It can mistake what is common for what is right. Politics needs both. Dreams to guide it, ground to hold it. Without idealism, change fades. Without realism, progress stalls. The best politics does not choose sides. It builds bridges between vision and action. In sleep, the mind does both. It dreams, but it also remembers. It floats, but it returns. And in that rhythm, we learn how to move forward. Not perfectly, but together. Deduction. Some forms of reasoning move with certainty. They do not guess, they follow. Deduction begins with a general truth and applies it downward. If the starting point is solid, the destination must be too. It's like stepping carefully down a staircase carved from stone. One step leads to the next until the conclusion arrives. Not as a surprise, but as something that could never have been otherwise. Deductive reasoning is not about discovery. It's about clarity. It doesn't search for new truths, it reveals what was already contained in the starting point. The pieces were always there. Deduction simply arranges them. It says, if this is true, then that must be. And if the first is firm, the second cannot fall. In daily life, people use deduction without noticing. When you lock the door and know no one entered, you deduce the room is still empty. When a pattern repeats perfectly, you know the next step. This kind of thinking feels reliable. It offers control in a world that so often feels uncertain. But deduction depends on its beginning. If the first step is wrong, every conclusion that follows carries the same flaw. The structure may be flawless, but it may still stand on sand. That is the risk. Perfect logic grounded in error. In sleep, the mind no longer builds arguments. It wanders, drifts, pauses. But the structure remains deep beneath. The sense that some things must follow. That some paths, once taken, have only one destination. And in that quiet certainty, the body rests. Induction. While deduction moves from certainty to certainty, Induction walks a softer path. It looks outward, gathers what is seen, and draws a pattern. If the sun has risen every morning, you expect it will rise again. If the water has always boiled at the same temperature, you trust it will tomorrow. Induction is not perfect, but it is practical. This is how people learn. Through repetition, through expectation, through trust in what has been. It builds the habits of daily life. It shapes science, medicine, memory. And though it never promises certainty, it offers something close enough to live by: probability, likelihood, comfort in familiarity. But induction has limits. Just because something has happened doesn't mean it must continue. The future may resemble the past, or it may break from it. And so, induction lives with risk. It moves in faith, not proof. Still, this form of reasoning is essential. Without it, the world becomes unrecognizable. Without patterns, there is no preparation, no plan, no way to act at all. Induction gives us the tools to expect, to prepare, to hope. In dreams, induction fades, patterns dissolve. The unexpected becomes normal, but even then, the mind remembers how things usually unfold. And that memory, though sleeping, still anchors the world you'll return to when the morning arrives. Abduction. There is another path the mind takes, not from rule to result or from habit to pattern, but from clue to cause. This is abduction, the quiet art of guessing what best explains what we see. A sound in the night might be wind. A missed message might mean distraction. These are not conclusions. They are possibilities, plausible, flexible, fallible. Abduction does not aim for certainty. It aims for coherence, for the best available story. It is how the mind fills gaps, interprets signs, and makes meaning from fragments. It does not wait for proof. It moves quickly, intuitively, often in silence, and though it sometimes errs, it is often enough. This form of reasoning is everywhere. It helps us understand behavior, navigate confusion, make decisions when information is thin. It's how we decide who to trust, what to worry about, what to believe when no one is explaining. But abduction is fragile. It can leap too far. It can choose the wrong explanation and hold it too tightly. The best story is not always the right one. And so, abduction requires humility, a willingness to update, to say, this made sense before, but maybe not now. In sleep, the mind still guesses. It still interprets, connects, builds. Dreams are abduction at rest, scenes formed from memories and feelings, stitched into a story that explains what cannot be explained. And in that strange logic, the mind continues its search for meaning, even while the body sleeps. Contradiction. The mind seeks harmony. It wants ideas to fit, to align, to make sense together. When they don't, something breaks. This is contradiction, when two things cannot both be true at the same time, when the same key plays two notes, when the same road points in opposite directions. Contradiction is not always loud. It can live quietly in a sentence, in a belief, in a plan. But once seen, it demands attention. Logic does not allow both sides to stand. One must bend, or both must fall. This is the rule. Something cannot be and not be, not in the same way, not at the same time. But contradiction is not only a flaw. Sometimes it reveals growth. It shows where ideas collide, where thought must deepen. It is the crack where reflection begins. And often, contradiction points not to error, but to complexity, a sign that something needs more time. In everyday life, people live with contradictions. They say they forgive but still feel anger. They believe in justice but fear its cost. These tensions do not make us broken, they make us human. But logic still whispers, something here doesn't fit. In dreams, contradiction is free. The rules fall. A person can be two things, a place can shift, time can fold, the mind no longer demands consistency, and in that release it rests, not in truth, but in permission to let go. The excluded middle. Logic, in its classical form, is sharp, it makes hard cuts. A statement is either true or false, there is no in-between. This is the principle of the excluded middle. It says, if something is not true, it must be false. No third option, no halfway, no room for maybe. This rule brings precision. It cleans up thought. It allows arguments to move forward without getting lost in gray. In many places it works well. Numbers, definitions, legal clarity, they depend on firm boundaries. But the world is not always sharp. Some questions do not answer cleanly. Is someone brave or reckless? Is an action kind or manipulative? Is a memory clear or clouded? Life often lives in the middle, in the maybe, in the sometimes, in the it depends. Still, the excluded middle remains useful. It shapes formal thought, it powers machines, it underlies much of science and structure. It is not wrong, but it is limited, and to rely on it fully is to miss the messiness of real life. The mind moves between these modes. Sometimes it wants clarity, other times it longs for nuance. Logic offers one kind of peace, compassion offers another. In rest, there is no need to choose, truth or lie, yes or no. The mind floats between states, unharmed by contradiction, untroubled by labels, and in that middle, the one logic excludes, sleep finds a home. Identity and logic. Among the simplest ideas in logic is the principle of identity, that a thing is itself. A tree is a tree. A promise is a promise. An idea remains what it is, regardless of when or how it is described. This seems obvious. So obvious that it can go unnoticed, like the quiet air holding everything in place. But identity is more than a label. It is the foundation that lets reasoning move. If nothing remained itself, thought would collapse. There would be no way to follow an argument, no way to define a word, no way to hold a memory. Identity is the anchor that keeps meaning from drifting. Yet, even this anchor has challenges. Some things change while staying the same. A river is never the same water, yet it remains the same river. A person grows, forgets, transforms, and still feels continuous. So, identity is both strict and flexible, a structure that must allow movement without dissolving. In daily life, we rely on identity to trust, to know that the friend who arrives is the same one who left, that the values we held yesterday still guide us today. It is how stories stay coherent and how promises remain true. In dreams, identity softens. One figure becomes another. One place shifts into something else. The mind plays with boundaries, bending what daylight insists must stay firm. And in that bending, there is freedom. A chance to feel what life is like when nothing holds still. Positivism and proof. For some, knowledge only feels secure when it can be proven, when it stands on evidence so clear it can be measured, tested, confirmed. This is the spirit of positivism, a belief that what matters is what can be shown, that truth requires demonstration, not intuition. This view shaped science, technology, and many parts of modern life. It asks for clarity and precision. It mistrusts vague claims and invisible forces. If something cannot be observed or calculated, positivism sets it aside, not as false but as unproven. There is a strength in this approach. It builds medicine that heals, tools that work, predictions that hold. It keeps inquiry honest, free from superstition or wishful thinking. But it also leaves something out. Not all truths can be weighed. Not all meaning can be replicated in a lab. love, grief, purpose, these exist, even when they cannot be pinned to a chart. Proof is essential, but it is not the whole of knowing. Some parts of life must be felt. Some truths arrive in quiet recognition rather than measured data. A balance is needed, respect for evidence, but also room for the unseen. In sleep, the need for proof disappears. The mind no longer demands experiments or validations. It simply accepts what appears. Dreams require no evidence to feel real, and in that acceptance, the mind rests without question. The shape of reasoning. Reasoning is not a single road. It is a network, a landscape, a set of paths crossing and dividing. Sometimes it moves step by step, building slowly. Sometimes it leaps, guided by intuition. Sometimes it spirals, returning again and again to the same thought, testing it from every angle. The shape of reasoning matters. A straight line can feel clean but leave gaps. A circle can seem repetitive but reveal hidden connections. A branching argument can explore many options but risk confusion. Each form has strengths and costs. In daily life, people use all of them. They follow chains of cause and effect. They circle back to doubts. They branch into possibilities when answers are scarce. Reasoning is not only about correctness, it is about movement, about finding a way through uncertainty. The shape also depends on the question. Simple problems invite linear paths. Deep questions about life, purpose, love often need loops, pauses, and returns. These shapes are not flaws. They are the mind's way of respecting complexity. In rest, reasoning lets go. The need to map every step fades. The mind no longer builds structures. It drifts through images, sounds, feelings, without shape, without argument. And in that formlessness, a different kind of understanding appears. Fallacies we all make. Even the sharpest minds stumble. Reasoning can slip into traps, patterns that feel right but lead nowhere true. These are fallacies, mistakes in thought that hide in plain sight. They are not rare, they are part of being human. Some fallacies come from emotion, a desire to belong, a fear of being wrong, a wish for certainty. Others come from habit, assuming that because something followed another, it was caused by it, believing that loud voices are truthful, trusting the familiar over the correct. These errors are not proof of weakness. They are signs of complexity. Thought must move quickly to keep up with life. It cannot examine every premise, so it uses shortcuts. Most of the time they serve well, sometimes they fail. To see a fallacy is to slow down, to ask, does this really follow? Or am I persuaded by feeling? This question does not always lead to a better answer, but it keeps thought honest. It keeps conversation open. In sleep, fallacies disappear. The mind no longer persuades or defends. It does not argue. It does not prove. It simply moves without judgment, without error. And in that release, the mind finds a gentler peace. Paraconsistent logic. Classical logic insists that contradictions must destroy a system, that if something is both true and false, everything collapses. But paraconsistent logic takes a different view. It asks, what if contradiction can be managed? What if inconsistency does not mean ruin, but reality? This form of reasoning does not reject clarity. It accepts that some domains are too complex, too tangled, to stay consistent at every edge. It says that contradictions can exist without infecting everything else, that the mind can hold competing ideas without dissolving. Paraconsistent logic does not celebrate confusion, it simply respects it. It offers a space where conflict is not catastrophe, where a system can adapt without surrendering all meaning. This is not weakness, it is resilience. In daily life, people practice this without knowing. They love and resent the same person. They believe in fairness but make exceptions. They feel certain, then doubt, then believe again. Life is rarely neat, and so thought must learn to bend without breaking. In sleep, paraconsistency is the norm. Dreams mix truth and fiction, memory and invention without apology. They offer no stable ground and no need for it. And in that free space the mind rests from the burden of always making sense. Symbolic language. Language is the shape of thought. But when precision is needed, when meanings must be exact and connections airtight, ordinary words can falter. This is where symbolic logic begins. It replaces language with symbols, turning reasoning into structure. It uses letters and signs to stand for statements, relationships, and truth. Symbolic logic doesn't rely on tone, emotion, or guesswork. It speaks in patterns, clear, sharp, rule-bound, like a language made of steel. Every statement has a place. Every conclusion follows or it doesn't. Ambiguity is erased. What remains is the bare framework of thought. This kind of logic can feel cold. It is not concerned with beauty or feeling, but it brings clarity that words alone cannot always carry. With symbols, contradiction is visible. Flaws become sharp. Proof becomes a pathway rather than a possibility. In daily life, most people do not think in symbols, but the structure is there, behind the scenes. In every decision, every argument, every plan. Symbolic logic gives shape to reason, even when we don't see it. It builds systems, powers code, guides machines, but it also reveals something quiet. That thought can be mapped. That meaning has architecture. In sleep, symbols dissolve. The mind no longer calculates, but the order remains, deep and silent. The calm that comes from structure, from knowing that even in confusion, there is form underneath. And that form is resting too. Modal logic. Most logic is concerned with what is, what's true or false here and now. But sometimes the mind reaches farther. It wonders about what could be, what must be, what is possible or impossible. These are the realms of modal logic, a way of reasoning that stretches beyond certainty into potential. Modal logic does not settle for the present. It asks, could this have been different? Is this necessary? Is this always true, or just true for now? It adds layers to truth, not just whether something is, but whether it might have been, or could never be. This kind of reasoning is not fantasy. It brings structure to imagination. It allows us to speak of alternate realities, of ethical obligations, of hypothetical futures. It frames how we reason through morality, science, and belief. Without modal logic, there is no way to talk about what should happen, what might happen, what must not happen. In life, people use this every day when they wonder what could go wrong, when they plan for options, when they ask, what if? Modal logic gives shape to uncertainty. It turns possibility into a field that can be explored, not just guessed. In dreams, possibility blooms. The mind moves through worlds that never were, moments that never happened. And in that fluidity, modal logic finds its truest home. A space where everything could be, and for a moment, is. Gödel's limits. There is a moment when the mind, trying to capture everything, reaches its edge. It builds a system, tight, complete, flawless. It tries to contain truth inside rules. But then, something strange happens. A new truth appears, one that the system cannot confirm or deny. It hovers, undeniable yet unreachable. This is the beginning of Gödel's insight, that even in the most precise systems, there are limits. A system of logic cannot prove every truth within itself. There will always be statements that are true, but unprovable inside the system's own walls. This means no structure of thought can ever be both complete and fully self-contained. There is always something left outside. Some whisper the system cannot answer. This isn't failure, it's humility. A reminder that thought, no matter how exact, has boundaries. That reasoning, like language or maps, points beyond itself. Gödel's idea is not about breaking logic. It's about showing where logic bows to mystery. In daily life, people try to make sense of everything, to control, to explain, to define. But some things will always resist, not because they are chaotic, but because they exceed the frame. Gödel's limit is not just in math. It lives in every conversation that trails off, every feeling that can't be named, every truth that doesn't fit the words we've made. And in sleep, these limits soften. There are no proofs, no systems to complete. The mind rests not because it solved everything, but because it accepts that not everything must be solved. Machines and minds. Machines can reason. They calculate, compare, decide. They follow rules without fatigue. In many ways, they echo logic better than any human. But the question remains, can machines think? Not just compute, but understand? Not just simulate decisions, but feel the weight of them? The mind is not only a processor. It remembers, forgets, dreams, fears, loves. It reasons, but it also wanders. It learns, not only from patterns, but from surprise. Machines, so far, do not. They reflect what they are given. They mimic, predict, respond. But do they know? This is not just about intelligence. It is about presence, about awareness, about the quiet pulse behind a thought, the part of consciousness that asks not only, "What is the answer?" but "What does this mean for me?" Machines can beat us at games, but can they regret a mistake? Can they long for change? Can they wonder who they are? The gap between machines and minds is not only technical, it is philosophical. It reminds us what it means to be human, not just to think but to experience, to carry time, to hold memory, to be moved. And in sleep, this difference grows even wider. The machine stops, but the mind enters its own world, a world of symbols and feelings, fears and grace, a place that no algorithm can yet enter. A space not for function, but for being. The liar's trap. There's a sentence that breaks itself as soon as it's spoken. This sentence is false. If it's true, then it must be false, but if it's false, then it must be true. It loops endlessly, collapsing logic beneath its feet. This is the liar's paradox, a riddle that defies resolution. At first glance, it feels like a trick, a language game, but its effect is deeper. It shows that even the simplest statements can unravel meaning, that truth, when turned inward, can fracture. The liar's trap is not just about contradiction, it's about self-reference. When a system tries to define itself fully, it stumbles. This paradox reveals the fragility of certainty, the way truth can twist, not from outside, but from within. It is a mirror facing itself, a question asking about its own question, and in that mirror, clarity dissolves. But the liar's paradox also teaches patience. It shows the limits of straight lines. It invites us to step back, not to dismiss logic, but to respect its edges, to understand that thought has borders, and beyond them lies something quieter. In dreams, the liar's trap loses its hold. The mind is no longer bound by truth or falsehood. It flows, neither proving nor denying, it simply is. And in that soft presence, the paradox becomes peace, not because it's solved, but because it no longer needs to be. Absurd conclusions. Sometimes, logic leads to places that feel wrong. The steps are careful, the form is valid, and yet the result lands like a jolt, something unsettling, even ridiculous. This is the territory of absurd conclusions, when the path of thought is clean, but the destination feels impossible. These moments shake our trust in reasoning. They make us pause. They ask, can logic alone be trusted? Or does truth need more than form? Does it also need intuition, experience, a sense of balance? Absurd conclusions don't always signal a mistake. Sometimes they show a hidden flaw in the beginning. Other times, they reveal that something essential was left out. Human context, emotional weight, a contradiction buried beneath clean lines. These outcomes matter because they humble the process. They remind us that being right on paper is not always enough, that logic must be guided, not by emotion alone, but by awareness, by remembering what the world is, not just what an argument claims it to be. In daily life, absurdity appears when beliefs stretch too far, when a single principle is applied without care, when rules outweigh reason. Recognizing this isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment when the mind steps back and says, something's off. In sleep, absurdity is welcomed. Dreams do not resist strange outcomes. They do not explain or correct. They allow the impossible to exist without collapse. And in that freedom, the absurd becomes not a problem, but a kind of playful rest. Slippery thinking. Not all errors are loud. Some arrive quietly, like a slope beneath your feet. You begin with a small step, a claim, a fear, a hunch, and without noticing, you've slid into something far larger. This is slippery thinking. The gentle fall from reason into exaggeration, assumption, or panic. It begins innocently. One thing might lead to another, but then the chain stretches, twists, multiplies. Soon, every action becomes a crisis. Every possibility becomes a guarantee. Every disagreement becomes a threat. The mind rushes ahead, past the present, into imagined extremes. This kind of reasoning isn't always illogical. Each step might seem plausible, but the path is tilted. It moves too fast, without friction. It forgets to pause. Slippery thinking thrives on fear, on urgency, on the false comfort of inevitability. Recognizing it requires patience, a willingness to ask, is this step real or just feared? Is this conclusion mine or something I inherited without checking? Slippery thinking feeds on speed. It fades when slowed. In real life, it appears in arguments, politics, relationships, in the urge to protect, to prevent, to control. But thinking clearly means resisting the slope, stepping back up, holding the present steady. In rest, the slide stops. The mind is no longer pushed, no longer rushing forward into danger or regret. It stands still, and in that stillness, thought regains its footing. Charitable reasoning. The easiest way to win an argument is to misrepresent the other side, to twist their words, shrink their views, or mock their tone. But this is not thinking, it is attack. Charitable reasoning offers a better way. It says, before you disagree, make sure you've understood. Not the weakest version, but the strongest. This approach is not about surrender. It is about fairness. It asks you to step inside another view, to listen, to see why it might seem true, to honor the care behind it. Even if you still reject it, you do so with knowledge, not caricature. Charitable reasoning is difficult. It requires empathy, not just logic. It asks for calm in the face of heat. It slows down conflict. It replaces outrage with clarity. And in doing so, it elevates the whole conversation. This form of thinking does not make agreement more likely, but it makes disagreement more meaningful, more respectful, more real. It reminds us that ideas come from people, and people deserve to be heard in full. In dreams, there are no debates, no opponents, no need to argue, but the spirit of charity remains, the willingness to see others whole, to believe that even in disagreement, something shared remains, something worth preserving. Simplicity versus truth. Occam's razor. When faced with many explanations, the mind looks for one that fits best. Not the most clever, but the most clear. This is the quiet principle of simplicity, that truth often lives in the idea with the fewest assumptions. That clarity is not only elegant, it's efficient. Simplicity isn't about cutting corners. It's about resisting complication that adds nothing. If two theories explain the same result, the simpler one, the one that assumes less, is usually stronger. It's not always right, but it's a good place to begin. This way of thinking respects balance. It prizes restraint. It reminds us that truth doesn't always arrive in grand form. Often, it's small, clean, quiet. It avoids needless machinery. It avoids reaching. It speaks clearly and stops when it must. But simplicity has its limits. Some truths are messy. Some problems require depth. The world is not always tidy. Simplicity is a guide, not a law, and it must be checked against reality, not just preference. In daily life, simplicity helps. It keeps thoughts lean. It protects against panic. It turns noise into signal. But it also teaches discipline. Not every new idea deserves space. Not every guess deserves belief. And in sleep, the simplest truths emerge. The mind lets go. It holds only what's needed. Breath, warmth, silence, nothing more. And in that simplicity, rest becomes possible. Existence precedes essence. You were not born into a definition. No title waited for you. No blueprint had your name. The moment you arrived, you were simply there, breathing, blinking, crying. There was no meaning carved into your skin, no instruction manual curled beside you in the crib. You existed first, and what you are, whatever that turns out to be, came only later. This is where it begins. Not with purpose, but with presence. Not with role, but with reality. You exist. You are here. Before anyone calls you strong or weak, before anyone calls you smart or lost or worthy or unworthy, before all that, you are. That is the foundation. Not the label, not the legacy. Just the fact that you are alive. From there, the story begins. Not the kind others write for you. Not the one your parents hoped or feared. Not the one strangers will one day try to explain. Your story unfolds only because you do. And as you move, breathe, fall, and change, your meaning takes shape behind you, not in front of you. You don't find who you are, you become it. The world may try to reverse this. It may tell you that you must be something before you are allowed to be someone, that you must earn your place, justify your breath, that your identity comes first and your life must obey it. But this idea rejects all that. It says, you are not a label looking for a body. You are a being carving meaning from time, step by step, choice by choice. This is why freedom is heavier than it looks. You are not just free to choose between options. You are free to create the options. Free to shape what kind of person you become. But that freedom brings a quiet burden. There is no script, no automatic role to hide behind, no final definition waiting at the end of the path. You are the one who writes the path by walking it, and no one else can do it for you. There is a certain ache in that kind of freedom, because it means no meaning is guaranteed. There is no built-in purpose stitched into your skin, no cosmic task written behind your eyes. Meaning must be made, not found. And making it means risk. It means you may wander, you may doubt, you may change, but still, you are the one shaping what you are. That's why dignity begins at existence, not at achievement, not at recognition. The fact that you are here, that you exist, is already sacred. It means you carry the power to define who you become. And that power is yours alone, not to please, not to prove, but to live. Some people try to avoid that freedom. They pick up ready-made identities. They cling to rules that feel safe, roles that are already written, and sometimes those roles help. They offer comfort, stability, tradition, but even then the truth remains. The choice to follow is still your own. You may live in someone else's structure, but the decision to remain there is always yours. That is the weight of existence. You are not born good or bad. You are not born noble or shameful. You are born raw. And from that rawness you shape the rest. Every mistake, every kindness, every broken promise, and every repaired bond, these are not signs of what you always were. They are the threads of what you are becoming. This view does not remove pain. It does not erase injustice. It does not promise that your effort will always be enough. But it gives you this: no matter what happens around you, you remain the author. The meaning you build is real because you built it, not because it was handed to you. Existence precedes essence. That means you are not here to live up to something pre-written. You are here to create meaning through living itself, through risk, through failure, through care, through the quiet, ordinary moments that no one else sees. Your choices do not fill in a picture someone else drew. They are the strokes of your own hand, imperfect, changing, real. And when it is time to rest, truly rest, that meaning doesn't vanish. It breathes with you. You are not a role shutting down. You are a presence returning to stillness. Not because your task is complete, but because your existence in and of itself is enough to let go.